Good morning, how are you? Good. We have quorum, we can start. Morning, everybody. If everyone could please take their seats, we're ready to begin. Councillors, members of the public, city staff. I rarely use my gavel, but today I will. Welcome to meeting 23 of the Community Development and Recreation Committee. Welcome to members of the committee and members of the public in attendance and city staff. For those in the room, the screen at the back of the room provides real-time updates concerning where we are on the agenda and what's coming up next. You can follow the agenda and debate on your computer, tablet, or smartphone at toronto.ca/council. Are there any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? There are none. Could I have a motion to confirm the minutes of September the 11th, 2017? Councillor Cressy, all those in favor? That is carried. So we have a list of speakers and presentations. So we will now go through the agenda. Item 1, Newcomer Youth Recreation Forum. Hold. Councillor Cressy is holding item number 1. Number 2, waitlist for service programs supporting individuals with disabilities accessing recreation services. There is a deputant to that for that. We will hold it. S.H. Armstrong Pool Working Group, final report. There are speakers on that item, so we will hold that. Raising the Village, top priorities. Moved by Councillor Mihevc. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item number 5, childcare growth strategy. There's a staff presentation and speakers, so I will hold that. Item number 6, Toronto Early Learning and Child Services projected center closures 2018. There are speakers for that, so we will hold that item. Item number 7, the Tenant Defense Fund Review.
Hold it only because I haven't had a chance to read the supplementary.
Sure, it's held by Councillor Wang.
Thank you.
Item number 8, Leslie Nymark Service Manager Consent. Do you move that, Councillor Mihevc? Yeah. All those in favor? That is carried. Item number 9, strengthening Rexdale Community Hub Board governance. There are speakers, so we will hold that. Item 10, review and identification of resources for Toronto Strong Neighborhood Strategy 2020. And there are speakers, so we'll hold that item as well. Item 11, 2017 allocations and recommendations, Community Investment Fund projects and events capacity building. Councillor Ford is holding that. And item 12, managing refugee flows. There are speakers, so we will hold that item. Is there anyone who would like to rearrange the agenda in any way? Move any items? No, we're good? Okay, item number 1. Councillor Cressy, this is the Newcomer Youth Recreation Forum.
I have a motion on this, which the clerks haven't quite finished, so we can hold that down and move on if that's all right.
So the motion would be speakers. Do you have any, for speaking, do you have any questions for staff? Any other members of the committee, questions for staff? Okay, we can go to speakers, and I'd love to see your...
The motion's not quite ready.
Oh, so we need a couple of minutes. Okay, we will hold down the held item. Item number 2, waitlist for service programs supporting individuals with disability accessing recreation service. We have a speaker, Helena Jakowaski. Is Ms. Jakowaski here? No? Okay. Well, if she shows while we were on this item, I'd be prepared to alter the order and go back and have her depute. But I don't want to keep holding down items we will never finish today. Questions for staff? Speakers? Does someone want to move the report? Councillor Cressy?
Oh, is she not here?
It's number two we're on, and our deputant is not here.
She's going to be here.
You want to hold it down?
I thought, I don't know. Why don't we just,
S.H. Armstrong is number 3, but we're on
thought
wait
Ms.
lists.
Earhart would be here this morning. I'm expecting her.
No, we're not there yet.
That's fine. Oh, okay. No, that's fine.
It's not
She's not here. That's fine.
Please.
Hold it?
Thank you. Councillor Wang Tam is moving number 2. All those in favor?
Oh, I'm fine. Yeah, okay.
Opposed? That is carried. Now we are on number 3, and we're looking for Sarah Earhart.
And she's not just here at the moment. Can we just go to number 5 then, please?
Sure. Number 5, Child Care Growth Strategy Phase 1 implementation. We have speakers. And a short, is there a staff presentation, a 5-minute presentation? Okay, great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we're here today, you can go to the first one. We're here today to provide more detailed information on Phase 1 implementation of the childcare growth strategy. You will remember that Council endorsed a 10-year growth strategy for childcare in Ontario or in Toronto for children from birth to age 4 in April, and it was based on findings from a licensed childcare demand and affordability study that we had undertaken by the University of Toronto. At the time, we were anticipating investment in growth from provincial and federal governments, but did not yet know the magnitude of that investment. Subsequently, the investment was confirmed in July of this year, and we were fortunate to receive $34.5 million provincially and an additional $21.5 million federally to contribute to the growth strategy. As a result of this, we were able to do a more refined approach to the Phase 1 implementation, which covers years 2017 to 2019. Just as a reminder, the growth strategy talked about building a capacity to meet demand for 50% of the child population, with subsidies available for 50% of those in childcare, supporting a thriving workforce by incrementally increasing salaries to the provincial benchmark of $25.26 an hour, and a public investment in affordability for families as well as in capital to ensure that we have the appropriate number of spaces for the childcare sector. I'll talk about these in a little bit more detail. In terms of approving affordability, the demand and affordability study identified that fees for parents would have to be reduced by 25 to 40% over the 10-year period to significantly improve access to childcare, and that we would need fee subsidies to address 40 to 50% of children in licensed spaces. As a result of the Phase 1 investment, we are able to commit to reducing fees for those in the higher range of the fee spectrum, the top third, by 10% at the end of 2019. And we're also pleased to announce that we're investing immediately in an additional 2,189 fee subsidies for children from birth to 4 years of age, as well as 427 subsidies for school-aged children. This has enabled us to maintain the current ratio of 41% of spaces in that for younger children being subsidized, and with the 427 additional subsidies for kindergarten and school-aged children, which we were able to input through our federal investment, we've been able to maintain a balance of subsidies for that age range also. In terms of supporting a thriving workforce, we determined as part of the study that 75% of the workforce in Toronto in childcare actually receives less than the provincial benchmark. And we've all identified that recruitment and retention of early childhood educators is a real challenge, largely because in many cases they're not making minimum wage, and care for school-age and kindergarten children tends to be split shifts. As a result of the investment, we're proposing to increase salaries in the lower third of the income scale by 6% over the 3 years of the growth strategy, the first 3 years. Those in this lower bracket earn between $11 and $20 an hour. Those in the upper bracket earn between $25 and $45 an hour. So we're gradually trying to move everybody to $26.27 an hour in 2016 dollars. We're also working closely with the province as well as with the Child and Family Network and colleges and universities to do what we can to build a thriving workforce and a cohort of ECEs to support the growth strategy. In terms of building capacity, this is probably the greatest challenge just in terms of the physical time required. The growth strategy talked about creating 30,000 spaces over a 10-year period, a challenge given that the average childcare centre is less than 100 spaces. In doing this, we're advancing implementation of our 10-year capital plan. We're exploring partnership opportunities with not-for-profit and public partners, including city divisions and agencies. And we've implemented a capital grant program where not-for-profit operators in the community can apply for funds to expand or retrofit spaces to accommodate younger children. We're also including a recommendation in the report that we are able to fund up to 90% of a project up front if that project has a committed agreement by the end of this year. The reason being federal dollars for capital, and we are able to use a portion of our federal investment for capital for year one, must be committed by the end of 2018. So this will allow us to do that while ensuring we maintain accountability and ensuring that the projects are being delivered as we had intended. The next two slides I'm just going to go over very quickly. I will encourage you just to look at the total column. When we initially did the growth strategy without knowing our commitments, we anticipated that we'd have a total of just about $75 million to invest from 2017 to 2019. But in fact, if you look at the next slide, we actually have closer to $100 million. So it's a very positive story for childcare in Toronto. This next slide, these slides are always a little confusing, so I do apologize for that. We've done what we can to simplify it, is to give you an overview of how we're allocating these resources. So you'll see the 2017 resources are all confirmed. 2018 resources are projected based on a good amount of information, and 2019 are also projected. So in terms of childcare fee subsidies for children from birth to 4, you will see that over the 3 years we're investing a total of $42 million. These numbers are incremental. For children from 4 to 12, we're investing $4.3 million for a total investment of fee subsidies of about $46 million. This means that we're 42% of the way towards achieving the target outlined in the initial growth strategy. In terms of reducing fees, we're looking at an investment of $30.2 million over the 3 years, which takes us just about 9% towards our target. Salaries, we're investing $9.4 million, which is 11% of our target. Special needs resources is at 1.1, and this is a formula that's developed by the province. It equates to 4.2% of the total budget. In home childcare, we're investing $3 million, and that really brings all those home providers and the agencies up to the same level of compensation and does improve compensation for the home providers. and then the administration is simply the resources that we need to roll out this plan. In total, we'll be investing over the 3 years $95.1 million in operating support and $32 million in capital. This is assuming that the city will invest $11.2 million, as was agreed to when Council approved the growth strategy, subject to the 2018 budget process. What we are recommending is that if that is approved as part of the budget process, the $11.2 million would be invested in creating physical spaces in 2018, and it would go into fee subsidies in 2019. The one thing that further complicates this chart that you can't see on it is because the federal allocation and provincial allocation came so late in the year, at July, we're able to carry forward a portion of the 2017 commitment to 2018. We are anticipating a carry forward of at least $12 million, and this will be used to further increase fee subsidies in 2018. You don't see that in the chart because it would be double counting. We've included the full allocation in 2017 where we received it. So I do apologize for the confusion there. We've been trying to desperately figure out how to simplify that. In terms of physical spaces, just to give you a high-level overview, by the end of 2019, we will have created an additional 2,000 spaces from children from birth to 4 years of age, and we'll be undertaking a consultation process that will engage each of you also to look at opportunities for further expansions across the city. In terms of looking at our capital allocation, you'll remember in the past when looking at allocating resources, we've done it based on child population, with looking at the percentage of children living below the low-income measure. With respect to capital, recognizing that we now need to grow the system for all families and across the city, we're looking at the capital allocation based on child population. So that does change the map a little bit from what you had seen in the previous presentation. In terms of our next step, we will be undertaking consultation early in the new year with parents and other stakeholders, both on affordability options and capital opportunities. We continue to develop and implement new policies and processes to ensure that the investments we're making in affordability and wages are actually realized. It's important to have protocols in place to ensure that that does happen, and it will likely be an addendum to contracts with our purchase.
Just as an FYI, we're closing in on 10 minutes.
Oh, sorry, I'm done, actually. And we're working with the province to develop, encouraging the province to develop salary guidelines and fee guidelines. Thank you. Sorry, I went a little over.
No, that's okay. That was the longest 5 minutes I've ever sat through. But no, very informative. Thank you very much. Questions for staff? Okay, do you want to do deputations first? Staff were here. I thought we'd... June Hall. Main Square Daycare. Toronto Coalition for Better Child Care board member.
Yes.
Thank you very much for coming. You have 5 minutes.
Okay, good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is June Hall. I have over 30 years experience in the child care system. I'm a director of Main Square Daycare and a board member of the Toronto Coalition for Better Child Care. Our city needs more child care. We support the Toronto Child Care Growth Strategy. But first, I want to share some data with you. In 2016-17, 246 child care centers opened, while 171 closed, for a net increase of 75 new centers. In 2016-2017, 38% of licensed child care spaces are located in communities like mine. That is up 2% from the previous year. My system represents 156,131 child care spaces. Our child care programs would love to support the expansion of the child care system, and I personally would like to add 5 toddler spaces to my program, but we can't. We can't because we rely on money coming in to pay those fees, and we don't have it. In September of 2016, the city stopped placing new subsidy spaces for children 3.8 years of age and under. Our center laid off a staff, including paying severance, and we cut over $30,000 from our program budget. In November of 2016, our program submitted its annual budget for 2017 to the city. It took too long for the city to get back to us. We had already paid out expenses for 6 months of our 2017 operating year. And then we found out that the city was going to be cutting $23,706 from our budget. Programs need to be notified before the budget year starts and be able to participate in a two-way conversation about the details of any adjustments. The current environment does not allow programs to expand and be supported. If we can't communicate in a timely manner, expansion is too difficult. In summary, expansion is expected by city residents, is possible by centers that operate programs, but it relies on timely communication and appropriate and reliable funding. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions for the deputant? Councillor Davis?
I'm struggling. This is the first time I've heard that you were going to lose money, 24,000 in your budget.
Yes.
Is that because you reduced the number of spaces?
No, I was told, based on a formula that happens within the budget that I'm not privy to, I'm overstaffed. And I was told that the particular cut is to my staff salaries. And that's all I was told.
Okay. Maybe we can have a little discussion with staff afterwards about that.
Sure.
This proposal proposes adding a whole lot of new spaces. So presumably you would be interested in restoring those toddler spaces or expanding even more if there was funding.
Reliable funding, yes. Not funding that gets pulled out from my budget 6 months into my operating year. And I've already spent it.
Yeah. Now, it's always been this way. That's the problem, right?
That's a big problem, yes, absolutely.
So this kind of catch-up, because the budget isn't approved until, well, the city budget isn't approved till almost the spring, and then by the time you get it, you normally know by when? June?
Yes, yes. You see, in 2015, our per diems were met. We're nonprofit, so our per diems are exactly what it cost us to operate. So in 2015, our per diems were met. In 2016, our per diems were met. In 2017, halfway through the year, money got pulled out of my budget, and
Okay.
it was $23,706. So it's surprising to me that when there's, you know, the Ministry of Ed and the province are investing in the expansion under 3.8, that, you know, why is this kind of money being pulled? It's not minor money, it's huge money.
Okay, we'll have to find out more. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Councillor Wang Tam?
Yes, thank you very much. I want to know, what was the fallout of the, of not receiving those per diems?
Well, our program budget was cut by $30,000. We will be, it's going to sound silly, but we won't be stripping and waxing our floors. We won't be going out and enhancing our program in terms of having agencies come in and support the quality of our program, so trips and outings. But you know, when I've already spent this money in staff salaries, and that's the dilemma, the intertwining of the fees for service and the salaries that staff are paid. If you start reducing fees in the system, you're basically reducing salaries. They're intertwined. They're not separate. And 80 to 85% of my operating budget is staff salaries and wages.
So essentially, it was the quality of care and programming for the children that did not get delivered after you found out that your funding was, or the per diems were not going to be delivered in a time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And what was the outcome of that for the parents, or perhaps the morale of your staff?
My staff, when they do come to me, they kind of hesitate in asking for stuff. And they know that it's not possible with that kind of loss. My parent board, a couple of my board members will be meeting with the city to discuss this issue in particular. We've already submitted a letter, and we will be sitting down with city staff to address this.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Wang Tam. Any other questions for the debutant? No? Thank you very much.
I'll just sit here because
James, you could stay here in case something more specific comes up that I can't answer for you.
Okay, you have a bodyguard now. Ms. Mercer, thank you very much for coming. It's Ms. Mercer, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much indeed, and good morning, committee members. I'm the staff person with the I'm the executive coordinator with the Toronto Coalition for Better Childcare. This Toronto Growth Strategy is such a good news report. We are so thrilled after decades of fighting to see this kind of growth happening in our system. But we really have to remind you that our childcare system has been on very shaky ground, very, very shaky ground as a result of being, in dealing with the expansion over the last 5 years from the full-day kindergarten when we really weren't getting the resources to do it. So we have an exhausted board members that are leaving boards faster than they're coming on, exhausted supervisors who are leaving faster than they're coming on. We're in a very precarious position for all of this expansion. You can get a lot of good information from that report. I really want to just, and this report, I really want to just emphasize 3 things. Number 1, we are counting on you to make sure that every single provincial, federal, and city childcare dollar that has been committed makes its way all the way through the budget process in December and January and into the delivery of service on the front line. We need so many more childcare spaces and subsidies, and we need affordable childcare for families. So we want to make sure that those dollars don't slip through the budget cracks as we go through those months. The second thing I would like to really stress is that your Toronto childcare growth strategy is virtually depending 100% on community childcare programs. I don't think there's a lot of plan in here for a huge expansion in the public. There may be a couple of centres which would be great, but it's all going into community childcare programs. I think we're currently delivering 96% of your system. So when childcare programs like Main Square, and believe me, there are 900 programs in this city like Main Square, and they are struggling with the gap between their actual costs and what they're getting from the city. Childcare programs are not getting their actual costs. They haven't been for years. You know, you're depending on these childcare programs. They've already gone through an exhausting period. We need to do everything possible to keep them strong. When they sit with deficits, when they've depleted their reserves, when their fees keep going up for parents because their subsidy costs are coming down, we're actually pushing parent fees up. And then what's happening, although nobody will actually admit to it, but we know it's happening, childcare programs are choosing, some childcare programs are choosing not to take a subsidized client if they could get a full fee. And who's surprised about that? They can't afford to keep losing money. When we ask our childcare programs to build their budget at a 98% optimal, as though they're 98% full the whole time, And then like this time last year, we had this freeze that went on for 2 months, and childcare programs sit with 3, 5, 10, 30 vacancies. In some of the larger centres, I have one program contact me and say they lost $90,000 last year. When we're not supporting our childcare programs, they're not going to be there for the delivery of this care. And finally, and absolutely most importantly, are we supporting our ECEs? We are absolutely counting on our ECEs to be there. But just like we're losing centres as fast as we can build them, we're losing ECEs as fast as we can recruit them. So I'm urging you to really reach out to those ECEs and ask them, what is it we could do to keep you in the field? Because you can't grow one more childcare program if you don't have a strong ECE workforce. And in my last 6 seconds, I'd like to remind you that it is Childcare Worker Appreciation Day on Wednesday. I have buttons for everybody and posters, well, not for all of you, you'll have to go, but for all of you, and for posters so that you can really show your support for your childcare programs in your community. And I hope when you go out to meet them, you'll ask the ECEs, what is life really like on the front line?
Great, thank you very much.
you.
Questions for the deputant?
Survey.
Councillor Mahevik?
Yes, this is a question for you folks. It's also a question for Laurel, who's next. Maybe even better for Laurel. But I'm sure you've done we're on this side of the table, we're at the political end, and I'm sure you're doing a SWOT analysis. Somehow, I don't think that your threat is here at the city, either at the staff level or at the political level. But there may be one at the provincial level, given that there's an election. What is, this is a pretty ambitious 10-year plan.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
You know, I think folks have been waiting for this a long time. What risks do you see that we need to help you, help us, back and forth, to overcome? Have you done that analysis as a kind of movement?
We've seen the growth in childcare spaces go from, I think, 54 to 74,000 over the last decade, something like that. We know that the expansion has been tremendous, and that's just very hard to support as a system. This is all coming from the top down. Like, the province has these great ideas, and actually they are great ideas, and great funding. And then the city has great ideas, and they're great funding. But at the bottom, we have very fragile childcare programs that are being held together by parent boards of directors. So what is our concern? What are the risks? That childcare programs close, that they stop serving subsidized children. They can't keep carrying these kinds of deficits. We are about to do a survey, it actually launches today, of childcare programs to ask, what are your real costs? As in, what are you charging your parents? And what are you getting paid by the city? And when that data comes out, I think you're going to be aghast. We were aghast when we did an informal childcare, or an informal survey of the huge range here. We're talking $105 for an infant space at the city, $69 a day for an infant space just down the road at Jane and Finch. And the argument is, well, your costs aren't so high. Well, your costs aren't so high because you've been giving us these crappy per diems. So that's one piece we really want you to focus on, is the fact that actual costs aren't getting met. That's one thing that's really of a concern. The other thing that is really of a concern is our ECEs. They have had more and more and more put on them over the last few years. I know the last month you had a deputation from a childcare, frontline childcare person on the AQI. She is also a very strong member of the Toronto Coalition. She chose to do that deputation. You know what she says? She speaks for thousands. She speaks for thousands. ECEs have been so demoralized by the constant barrage from the city, from the province. We might see 5, 6, 7 city people in the centre each year. We see provincial people in the centre. We also abide by all those other rules that you do, like labour laws and WSIB and workplace health and safety and public health. It's all of that. Everything has loaded down. We've got no more money for admin. Well, there's an idea. That's something you could do. The province has given 10% for admin for this childcare expansion. That 10% doesn't have to stay with the city's admin, not when all of our childcare directors are doing more than half the admin. They're the ones that are purchasing the equipment. They're the ones that are enrolling the families. They're the ones that are managing what we're going to do when we've lost one child and now we're actually running at a deficit. They are carrying all that load. Those admin dollars, like the city has in a previous grant, I think it was the PWE, that in the end the admin money was shared between community and city. Thank you.
I think we had the question answered. Did you have a question? Councillor Davis? You did, okay.
I'm really struggling to understand this, actually, because we added in the June budget an additional $1.5 million for wage enhancement, additional money for expansion, additional money for the general operating grant of $1.4 million, and an additional increase in per diems for 2017, another $2 million. So I'll ask staff, but it was my understanding that we were paying actual costs. That's still the policy of the City of Toronto. Okay, well, I will ask some other questions because we have been adding money to base budgets and to actual cost. But on the actual expansion plan, you're supportive of the plan that's here. One of the issues that I see is, and I've learned, is that the provincial government has given us money primarily for subsidies. And my concern is around affordability and more base funding to make more spaces more affordable so that we fund the base budgets more. And I'm wondering whether that's an issue you've raised with them at all. Because they talked about a universal childcare system when they made an announcement.
So have we spoken with
them,
the Ontario
raise the issue of affordability.
I think I'll leave that to Laurel, who's coming right after me. Are you asking if I've spoken personally with the Ontario government? I have to say, not we. Toronto
MPPs?
Coalition has been so darn. Oh no, we do.
MPPs, I'm talking about.
But our focus is definitely at the city level, where the money is getting managed and distributed. I have to admit, we have not launched directly towards the provincial government since that announcement.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Any other questions for the deputant?
Oh, I beg your pardon.
Councillor Wang Tam?
Sorry, we do sit on the Minister's Steering Committee. I beg your pardon. That's why I've got June up here, because she sits on it for us.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your deputation. I just want to ask, with respect to the sort of the tone of the report is that there's a lot of good news contained in there. Yes, it'll take 10 years to implement to bring us to 50% subsidies. You have a very different message for us today. How do we reconcile the two?
I don't want to take away from this report. It has strong recommendations, but it's the high level. It's saying this is great news, and it is great news. We have waited decades for this kind of money to come into our system. This is great news. We are going to expand this system. But further down, Our childcare programs are very fragile, and they're partly fragile. I mean, a big reason they're fragile is because during all those years of 7 years or 8 years, or how many years have we had when we haven't been getting money in the system? The city has been very tightly controlling the money that we do have, that you have, and childcare programs have been very fragile underneath. So when we have a great announcement like this, we have to remember it comes after 7 years of a drought in terms of adequate funding. We've expanded the system for full-day kindergarten children. But who expanded that system? Childcare programs, they were forced to, they were pressured to do that between the city and the school board. You've got to expand, you've got to, the parents put pressure on. It was all required under this direction from the province. But the childcare programs, that cost them $30,000, $60,000, $90,000 to implement. Let me just give you one short example. A decade or two ago, if we opened up a childcare program 2 decades ago, Councillor Davis would know this, you would get capital money, minor capital money, to buy all your equipment for the rooms, and you'd get an operating grant of $60,000 to get you started. You don't get those things now. No, I'm being told it's not true. So anyway, I'm apparently saying something that's not true. So your staff will correct me.
Well, let me ask another question, because I was trying to understand the reconciliation of the good news report and through the presentation by way of staff, the message that you have. In the staff report, there's much of it that's sitting contingent on, number one, receiving the funds from the province, but also contingent on successful adoption through the 2018 budget process. So the city's matching contributions. Over the horizon, we have a provincial election coming up, so all the good news that has come out of the province could perhaps disappear with a new government, with a different mandate, with a different set of priorities. What will happen to the childcare sector if the city does not come up with its 20% by way of the 2018 budget, and if along the political horizon we have a change of government and everything that's on the table today is gone?
Well, that's the kind of risk we run when we ask a childcare program to build, when we say there will be children coming, and then later down the line, they're not. It's like you've built hospital beds, but now you don't have any patients in, and the patients come with the daily dollars. So you build childcare spaces, and if we can't keep them secure and filled, then the childcare program bears the loss. And when we say the childcare program bears the loss, the parent fees go up to cover. So I don't want to say we're not supportive of this report. I just think that this needs to come, we need to be watching this from the bottom up, not just the top down. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wang Tam. Any other questions for the deputants? No? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Laurel Rothman, Terra Coalition for Better Childcare. Thank you very much for coming. You have 5 minutes.
Good morning. I'm the interim coordinator while Carolyn Ferns is on maternity leave. And some of you, I also have many decades of experience, and some of you will remember my being around this table when I was the workplace daycare coordinator in the early 80s and other things, working on Section 37 until the and various aspects of the old city's role in childcare. So I'm pleased to be here, and I'm really came at the higher level, if you will, the 30,000-foot level, to say this is an excellent report. We certainly continue at the Ontario Coalition to look to the city for its leadership, and I'm pleased that it's continuing and has continued through different leadership at the city. I was particularly pleased to see the commitment of the 20% city contribution, because as we discussed earlier, We will need all levels of government, as well as a strong, robust community on board to indeed implement the growth strategy. I was struck, I might not have picked it up in the report, but I believe it was Elaine's comment that 75% of registered early childhood educators now do not yet earn 26 whatever and change dollars an hour, the starting level at junior kindergarten assistants. That's certainly, I know that to be across the province. I didn't think it would be as high as in Toronto. So let me be brief and say, we're particularly strong on recommendations 1 and 4. And in the first one, we have for a while been calling for a sliding fee scale with a cap. We haven't come upon a number, but we certainly support the energy and thrust of where Acorn is going with their recommendation. But I just want to underline what I think probably is in the report and that you probably know. We not only need a sliding fee scale, we need a salary scale. We need to be able to balance that so that governments know what's needed to make it work on the public policy and public funding side, as well as the parental contribution. And of course, that will mean more public funding at the senior levels as we continue to push for. The other small comment on the recommendation around consultation with agency stakeholders regarding options. Two things. I hope that there will be a specific exploration of base funding. If we don't move to a situation where we have an even, I'll call it, even higher level of predictability of how funding works and what it will be, at the same time as a changed, a transformed fee structure, then it's going to be very hard to grow that system. And so when you're doing the consultations, I would just encourage you to be flexible about when and where and how you do them, because I think we do need to hear from parents who, of course, continue to be, what's the right word, in need of high-quality childcare. So maybe I'll just stop there.
Thank you very much. Questions? Councillor Mihevc?
Thank you. Nice to see you, Laurel. I'm going to ask you the same question I asked before, but directed a little bit more. When I do my SWOT analysis, and you know, this is, of course, a dear issue to so many folks in Toronto, I'm wondering, does this have the support of all provincial parties at the provincial level? This is where the money's coming from. There's an election less than a year away. And, you know, we've been there, done that at the federal level. New government comes in, bango, done, over, finished. If that ain't the biggest threat, I don't know what is. And so is there anything happening at the Ontario Coalition for Better Childcare level to make sure that all four major political parties in Ontario, I guess, are fully briefed and that they are solidly behind it, and there's a movement to make sure that there are commitments so that this doesn't unravel the way it did when this happened at the federal level?
Important question, and I would say we're in the process. We're starting this Wednesday. We're having a briefing and a breakfast for all MPPs at Queen's Park in recognition of Child Care Appreciation Day. I would say that we do meet with all the parties. We will continue to do that. Whether we will be able to get full commitment to everybody to this direction, I'm not sure, but we'll keep trying because I agree. We absolutely need to have provincial commitment and leadership if this is going to go forward.
Thank you.
Councillor Davis, you had questions for the deputant?
I did want to ask, the provincial government has made some pretty sweeping statements about moving to a universal system and affordability for all families, and yet I think there has been little flexibility in terms of allocation of the funding at the local level. I'm wondering if that issue has come up at all in other municipalities.
Yes, I would say indeed. What I've learned in the last couple of months is there's tremendous variation among the municipalities. I know that the consultants, Gord Cleveland and Michael Krasinski, working on the affordability study, are in touch with all the municipalities, or are in the process of gathering information, let's put it that way. And I would say that there is tremendous variation.
So
I would also, my understanding is in November, there will be a roll-up of what the plans and recommendations of each of the municipalities and where they're at, and that will be a public report in November, I'm told, so I'll watch for that.
And so Cleveland and Krasinski are intended to report out when? Do you know?
Their report is due by the end of February.
Okay. And so is it your understanding that the provincial government is then going to address affordability after that?
Well, how should we say this? Informally, people say they want to put in place as many changes as possible before an election may come. That's all I know at the informal level.
Okay. Thanks, Laurel.
Okay,
It's great to see you here again.
thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Any other questions for the departed deputant?
Departed.
No? Well, you're still on this earth, you're just no longer at the microphone. Okay, great. Thank you very much. I'll apologize in advance for maybe mispronouncing these. Alexandra Ruiz Vargas and Peruia Just. Great, thank you very much for coming. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Alexandra. And thank you for the opportunity to be here today. We are ACORN members, and as you know, ACORN is an organization who fight for social change. So we are here today because we want to speak about a campaign that is called $10 and Change. On the economic and social impacts of accessible, high-quality childcare system, Toronto report shows 5 key areas that had an impact on socio-economic development for the city of Toronto. First, potential of economic stimulus. 2, increase labor market participation. 3, reduce poverty and reliance government programs. 4, improve child development outcomes. And 5, increase social network for families. The reports also mention that in Quebec, and I want to open brackets, you know, they are our neighbors. So this is here in Canada. So if they can do it, we can do it. Because they had $10 per day fee. So when they adopted the $7 fee childcare, all mothers' women's participation labor market increased in 12% points. And the most vulnerable mothers increased in 22 percentage points. So knowing all these facts, the city of Toronto is insisting to put affordable childcare in the slow cooker. The city had planned to build and to improve affordability for families called Toronto's Licensed Childcare Growth Strategy to 2026. We, ACORN, seeing that this strategy is not good enough. There are hundreds of thousands of families in the city of Toronto waiting for a change, waiting for a miracle. The federal government has failed us, the people, with housing. The government of Ontario, the provincial government, has failed us selling our hydrant, impacting again our bills. The city of Toronto, please don't fail us. When the city really is going to understand our needs? We need a 10-day free childcare. We need a control field for childcare centers. We need the increase of childcare centers and spaces in wards. We need the fund to increase to accommodate the different work shifts for people. We need the use of libraries, community centers, and apartment buildings as a space for childcare. We need funding programs for fair wages for early childhood educators and everybody who works in the centers. We need the 3 levels of government involved. 2026 is too long to wait. I am a single mother, and when my income increased, my fee for the daycare increased too. So bye-bye curricular activities for my daughter, and bye-bye savings. And again, we are tired to wait. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Questions for the deputant?
Yes, together. We are frank.
Yeah, it's one deputant. Any questions? Councillor Wang Tan?
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you very much for your deputation. Given what is contained in the staff report and what I'm hearing from you, you still have concerns that it doesn't go far enough, and that what is projected in terms of a 10-year plan doesn't meet the needs of working and struggling families today with respect to subsidies for childcare. Is that correct? That's your concern?
This is our concern, yes, because if I decided to have a baby today, so 10 years again of poverty.
And are you concerned about addressing that the report perhaps doesn't have enough in there to address overall affordability for all income levels?
Yes, we agree on that.
And with respect to the $10 and change campaign, the request now is to the province to sit down with Acorn to work out a strategy where you can build a $10 a day subsidy for families that qualify. Is that correct?
Totally correct.
And and you'll probably recognize that the report here before us also is very much contingent on whether or not we can move through the 2018 budget process at the city, whether or not we can actually come up with our 20% share to close that, to meet the phase 1 implementation of the growth strategy. Are you concerned that with the promise of flatlining the city's budget, which is, you're not going to get more money to deliver more service, are you concerned that we're not able to meet our promise through the 2018 budget process?
You want to answer that?
Not sure about that.
Do you have confidence? Do you have confidence in City Council that we will do the right thing and fund our share?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we had confidence in you guys.
Yeah. So you have confidence in us. You don't have confidence in the province.
Right. Well, yeah, the lion's share of the funding is coming from there, and we're not sure, so we need to work with the city and make sure that this is a ballot box issue come election time.
Okay, for being truly honest, sometimes the councilors has good intentions, but I'm not too sure we are confident that you can do it if you don't have the budget. Because anyway, elections is coming, and what about this will be a new mayor, and so 2026 project is gone.
There are over 14,000 children on the child care wait list today. Even if we came up with our share of the money at the city level, and even if we implement this 10-year strategy for child care growth, we still will not be able to address the full-on deficit that exists today that will most likely continue to grow as the population in Toronto grows. Is that correct?
Right.
Yes, right.
Yeah, and what we're looking for is for the city of Toronto City Council to really be united and see that this is a win-win-win situation. Parents are going to win, kids are going to win. The government's going to win through the economic return on investment of between 50 and 150% based on similar jurisdictions. And so when the Toronto City Council is all on board, then we can kind of united go to the Ontario provincial and federal government and speak with them about this. And instead of the city just saying, well, we're going to just fully defer this to the Ontario, the provincial level. Does that make sense?
Yes. My final question is that as families are waiting for subsidies to access childcare, if you don't have access to those subsidies, what are your choices? Do you stay home? Do you,
Yes.
like, you just don't work?
Yeah, we don't work, and so a lot of parents end up being on welfare, social assistance. So, the government's paying for it one way or another, and apparently the government's paying a lot more for it when the government is not actually making the investment up front.
And the other piece that I would like to add is, when I was without work, because I didn't have childcare, and then I found the childcare, and then I feel penalized because I had the subsidy fee increase. So it's like no win. But this $10 a change really will make the win for every family in the city of Toronto.
Okay, thank you.
And sorry, I thought we each had 5 minutes to speak. Is that not the
Yeah.
case? Oh, we do.
Yes, yeah, you know.
Thank you, Councillor Wang Tam. Are there any other questions for the deputants, or?
Because he didn't speak yet.
Oh, I thought this was a 2-for-1 special. Okay, all right. You'd like 5 minutes?
Please.
Okay, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning, councilors. My name is Puriya Just, and I'm a single dad to a 4.5-year-old son named Dustin. I'm an entrepreneur, and I've co-founded 3 companies, and I sold one of those companies just before my son was born. Now, when Dustin was born, my wife developed depression and needed me to watch our son most of the day, every day. And our parents did as much as they could to help, but it was difficult. And since I had just sold the company, I was researching to find my next company, what I was going to do next. However, I was unable to, as I was basically a stay-at-home dad. And we were eventually forced to hire a nanny. It cost us over $3,000 per month due to the hours that I needed to work. The lack of affordable high-quality childcare had a huge impact on our family's life, which we're still dealing with, including divorce, a lot of stress on the family, and financial instability. When Dustin was 3 years old, my wife and I got separated, partly due to the financial pressures of childcare. And the only reason we were able to have affordable childcare when Dustin was 3.5 years old was because my wife was dealing with severe mental health challenges, including attempted suicide. And as an exception, we were able to receive fully subsidized childcare through York Region Social Services until he started junior kindergarten this past month. I'm very thankful that he's in a high-quality junior kindergarten program now. And he was diagnosed moderately autistic last year. And although he's high-functioning, he had some developmental delays. But his daycare program really helped him to develop his social and language skills. And if he was in daycare sooner, I'm sure his development would have been even further now. And that will actually, the fact that he didn't get it earlier is going to impact his life and what he can contribute as an adult. I know that I shouldn't be thankful for his mom's mental health issues, but as devastating as it has been for our family, I'm partly thankful for it because it gave my son the childcare and mental development that he so badly needed. And for every child like him, only a fraction of them are getting the early childcare that they need. And that will impact those kids' lives and their productivity later down the line. I now see that what was missing for the first 4 years of his life was a childcare support system to help my family so I could keep working and contributing financially, especially when my wife was having health issues. Instead, I lost a lot of momentum professionally by being off from work, on and off, for a total of 3 years. And most parents are not as lucky as we were. We were able to have affordable childcare for 1 year before he started junior kindergarten, which made a huge difference for us. Right now, daycare is not affordable nor accessible for most families, and that has a huge impact on families, neighborhoods, and communities, not to mention our economy. That's why a group of us parents in the community are working on expanding a free program to support parents by helping them to create neighborhood babysitting groups. This is going to be a great support for parents to have childcare a few times throughout the week, but it does not in any way replace full-time professional childcare. Overall, what there is to underline about this campaign is that it's a no-brainer. Even if we remove the direct quality of life and economic benefits this initiative will have on parents and children, we know, based on the experience of Quebec and other jurisdictions, that our economy will benefit from a 50 to 150% financial return on investment. To say that again, our economy will generate 50 to 150% ROI from implementing Acorn's campaign. So overall, our campaign is really about having all politicians involved in this process know that it's a win-win situation. If I came to any of you guys and said that there was an investment that would give you between 50 to 150% return, what would you say to it? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions for the deputant? Councillor Wang Tam?
Yes, thank you very much. In your narrative, your child is now four years old.
Yes.
3 years you struggled to gain access to some form of childcare.
Yeah.
In the fourth year, you were successful, and in that 1 year, you've been able to turn things around. Is that what you're saying to us?
Yes, he entered daycare at 3.5, and so he's been in it for about 10 months before he started junior kindergarten. And in that 10 months, he went from being quite a bit below his classmates in terms of his cognitive development, speech, gross and fine motor skills, and socialization. And within that 10 months now, he's caught up significantly and is doing quite well.
If you were able to receive the childcare that you needed at the time you needed it, what would be the difference today?
Well, you know, he's just potty training now at 4.5 years old, and his teachers told us this should have been done quite a while ago. So he would have been a lot more confident in terms of his potty training, also in terms of his language and motor skills, and just his socialization, so that he can get along with his peers and really feel confident in life.
What opportunities did you miss as a working parent because you were not able to obtain childcare in a timely fashion?
There were a number of business opportunities that came my way, and I had to let them go because I'm more committed to being a great parent than to making money. I'm sure that, so right now, I'm actually, the economic impact personally has been that I've moved back in with my mother, and so she's supporting me in order to be able to build up my current startup. And, you know, instead I just would have had, you know, it's a good question. I'm not sure exactly what it specifically would have looked like, but I know that I wouldn't have had to make such hard choices in terms of, you know, buying him shoes or buying him clothes, and, you know, versus food. And there was a lot of difficult financial choices that were made that just, you know, wouldn't have been the case if he had been in a childcare program earlier.
How do you reconcile the contradictions between government policies that perhaps encourage entrepreneurs, encourage a startup culture, encourage the innovation ecosystem, and at the same time not invest properly in the social services that actually enables all of the other good things to happen economically? How do you reconcile those contradictions?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, the impact is that, you know, a lot of us entrepreneurs are not able to go and take advantage of those, you know, incubator models and other government supports because we're at home taking care of our kids. And it's either that or we, you know, sacrifice our kids and then go out to, you know, create something that's a change in the world, but we're just not having that support to really be able to do what we're up to in the world.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wang Tam. Any other questions for the deputant? No? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Questions for staff? Councillor Davis.
I just wondered if you could remind us, the numbers on the chart on page 7 are, page 7 is clearly the page that summarizes all the federal and provincial contributions, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so Phase 1 is a 3-year plan. In those 3 years, how much are we getting from the province, and when does it have to be spent by, and what are the provincial dollars going towards?
So for year 1, we received $34.5 million. Year 1 has to be expended by the end of 2018. For year 2, we're expecting to get $34.5 million plus an increase, which would have to be spent in 2018 calendar year, and similarly, another 34.5 with an additional increase of some proportion that would have to be spent in the 2019 calendar year.
What kind of increase are we expecting in year 2 from the province? They committed to a 5-year plan to have 100,000 spaces, and we had envisioned that we were going to get...
We've projected a $7.7 million increase in year 2, so 2018, for growth. And we've done that based on what we know already of their allocation for the first quarter. The provincial growth money can be used for fee subsidies, increasing access, and if we've done all that and still have unallocated resources, addressing affordability.
Okay.
We've chosen to do all 3.
So they've given us money for fee subsidies and for...
Access, so expanding
does that mean?
access. Well, it's difficult to define, but it could be used to expand service provision. So we've been looking at it as managing to open rooms that may be closed so that we can get additional children into care. We've considered addressing affordability as a means of improving access, and also addressing the wage issue to the extent that we can, recognizing that with a stable staff, it's easier for centres to operate.
The federal money is how much?
The federal money is $21.5 million for each of the next 3 years, 2017, 2018, and 2019. And then it's expected in 2020 there would be an increase on that. There is a 3-year agreement for federal dollars. For year 1, the federal dollars can be used, a portion of them can be used for capital. They can also be used for fee subsidies, and also a portion, 5%, was able to be used for children from 5 to 12, and we took advantage of that. There is a 3-year agreement for the federal dollars. The year 1, $21 million. 2/3 of it must be spent in 2017 or committed, and 1/3 of it can be carried over to the end of 2018.
Okay, so we have a lot of work to do to spend all the money.
Yes.
But also, what is not clear to me is why we chose to put so little into addressing affordability for all families. It looks to me like we've addressed the subsidy challenge by 42%, but only the affordability target by 8.88%.
There's a number of reasons. First of all, it was not in the top priority of the provincial guidelines. Secondly, we need to ensure that we have the policies and contractual agreements in place to ensure that when we invest money to reduce fees, that it does actually go to reducing fees. In other jurisdictions, Australia is a prime example, when they have dramatically increased funding for affordability, they found that while the funding did increase to the agencies, the fees continued to increase. So we're hoping that with a provincial framework, and that's one of the recommendations, around fee scales and salary scales and affordability, it will ensure compliance across the province.
Okay, so I understand we need different mechanisms, and it was not a priority for the provincial government, is what you've said. Is the expectation that the government will actually, after they do this study with Cleveland and Krasinski, that we will be able to allocate more towards affordability?
I would certainly think so, and they're also exploring different ways of addressing affordability.
Okay. The other thing is the targeted expansion is for all children, all families, based on child population?
Our investment of capital is now looking at child population across the city, right down to the neighborhood level, recognizing that capital, with the 2018 deadline for investment or commitment of the federal dollars, we're really looking at what we can do quickly. Capital generally takes 3 to 4 years, and we're working very aggressively with as many partners as we can find to really try to address those red areas in the map.
And we've got, we've also are expecting the school boards to get money, and we don't know how much that is yet. Is that correct?
That's correct. That announcement is expected early in the new year.
I've already seen a list. I'll share it with my colleagues, but it already has been identified.
Councillor, that's just the list that was submitted. Ultimately, the province will decide, and that's the TDSB list. There was a total of 60 schools in Toronto submitted for requests for funding.
Okay, I don't want to spend more time on it, but I will share with my colleagues where the requests have been made for schools across the city. What I'm struggling with, the 11.2 million of the city money for 2018 is in capital. And then in 2019, our 11.2 million is then going to go towards subsidies. I see at the bottom of column, 2018 column, it's in capital, and I understand then in 2019 that 11.2 is going to go into subsidies. How are we going to take it from capital if it's, and then put it into the base the following year?
So I think we need to separate the city's capital budget from capital investment and expansion. We're recommending that that 11.2 million for 2018 be used for capital, given that we have the carry forward from the province and feds that can go into affordability. How the city funds that 11.2 million will be determined as part of the budget process.
But how do we
That
get
was
it,
your
keep
last
it in
question.
the base?
Councillor Davis, that was your last question.
Okay.
Any other questions for staff? Councillor Wang-Tam?
Yes, can I get an answer to Councillor Davis's question?
How do we get it in the base? It may well be in the base. That's something that needs to be determined with financial planning through the budget process in terms of how to fund that 11.2 million. The intent, should council approve it, is regardless of how it's funded or possibly phased in, by 2019, the 11.2 million is in the base for fee subsidies.
And that's going through our budget process.
That's our budget process.
So a question regarding, I guess, a deputation regarding the morale of EC workers. And I think it's important to talk about the bricks and mortar of service delivery, but it's also very important to talk about the people. There's been comments about the morale of EC workers being extremely low, probably on the receiving end of just financial instability. And that perhaps we're going to be losing the very critical workers that are needed to actually provide the service as we're trying to build more centers. In this plan, how is that specifically addressed?
The plan includes $84 million directed towards increasing and improving compensation for ECEs. I don't necessarily agree that there's a morale issue across the system. I think there's great excitement at the growth. There are concerns, however, that with the low wages of ECEs, it's very difficult to retain qualified professional staff in the profession. The colleges are graduating significant enough students to support the expansion, but many of them are opting out of the system largely because of A, salaries, or B, if they're serving kindergarten and school-age children, the split shifts.
But isn't there a direct correlation between low wages, difficult working conditions, and morale? Like you're saying?
There absolutely is, and that's why we're targeting $84 million to address the wage issue. And in phase one, we're focusing predominantly on the lower third of those wages.
Okay, so that's two different things being said, but you're confident that that's going to be addressed through the.
We are, and we're also working with our partners and the province in doing capacity building in the community to help them sustain the growth.
Another question regarding the suggestion that most of the childcare service that's being delivered is being delivered through community-based childcare nonprofit programs. But at the same time, it's this particular sector that is that's feeling the instability. Are you saying that this report, based on the phase one of the child care growth strategy, is that you'll be able to address the sort of that service deficit by way of this report, by way of this phase one implementation?
Absolutely, but the one thing I should point out, Councillor, is that we are paying actual costs in the community, and because of the incremental increases in our general operating grant, which is base funding, we were able to, the actual fee increase last year was less than 1% on average. So we are paying actual costs, but we do have guidelines governing what costs, benchmarks for costs to ensure the best use of public resources.
And how do you think we should respond to the deputant who spoke about the deficits being carried forward by the community-based childcare centers? Obviously, that's not sustainable. Even a $30,000 sort of holdback, or perhaps $30,000 disappearing from a budget, that means that the entire center may not go forward. How do we reconcile that? I'm hearing different things here.
Well, first of all, on that specific issue, and I won't get into the details, my staff have asked to meet with the Board of Directors. There was a reduction in one line of the budget of the $24,000, but the average per diem to that agency went up by 2.4%, so they did receive increased funding. I don't want to say that the majority of the system are carrying deficits, because that frankly is not true. Where there are agencies carrying deficits, our consulting team works very closely with them to ensure that they have a financial plan. The one thing I will say, as we send out our final numbers on the budget this year to agencies, I've asked that we be a little bit more detailed in terms of explaining what is eligible and what is ineligible for funds, to ensure that it's fully understood and transparent.
Okay. I just want to dig a little bit deeper, because I'm hearing two different things. And so forgive me if I've misspoken and said that the majority of these centers are feeling deficits, and clearly that's not the case. But when a center does face a deficit, obviously that has quite dramatic impact to the local community that it's providing service for. How do we reconcile that?
Well, first of all, we'd look at what's causing the deficit. If it's something that we should have been funding that we haven't been funding, we will look at the per diem and revisit that. If it's something that the agency is funding that is not eligible under our guidelines, we would certainly explain that to the agency and take it from there. We would also work with them to have a deficit reduction plan and to look at what their annual budget is, that's where the pressures are and how they can be resolved. But we are not opposed to revisiting budgets when needed if we think we've missed something.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Wang. Councillor Fletcher?
I just have a couple of, I know that this is from the 2000.
Is your microphone on?
Oh, now it's on, yes, thank you. I note that this is from the 2016 census. When did you get that information?
Oh, the information has been coming out incrementally. I think this most recent one was from the summer. Yes.
So this map that you have on your great presentation here, that was compiled in the summer, the access to childcare neighborhood priorities, is that?
The child population data came in the summer, and that's what we used to remap.
Child population data came from?
From Stats Canada.
From Stats Can, okay, thank you. And I want to know how you work, and if you work with planning, to look at childcare centers related to incredible growth and what's considered now 30,000 new residents a year moving into the City of Toronto, let alone the gaps that we have already in childcare, which we've noted over many years. What's your approach there, and who do you work with?
We work directly with the policy and research area in finance, in planning, as well as with the district operations and planning to ensure that we're reflecting their projections of growth as well as the province's projections of growth in the population. In addition, planning has now identified childcare as a priority in all Section 37 and development discussions to ensure that we are addressing projected growth in child population. In addition, the 30,000 increase that's required in physical spaces that's outlined in the growth strategy was based on both Stats Canada data as well as provincial planning data and municipal planning data.
So at what point do you say to the planners, here's TO Core? How many childcare spaces are you including in TO Core? Is childcare a component of TO Core?
It absolutely is. I was on the steering committee.
So
and
how
we
many new spaces are you looking to say need to be added in?
I would have to get that information for you. I don't have that specifics with me, Councillor, but I can certainly get it for you.
And the same with any planning area, because every area has planning managers, number of wards.
Yes, we can try to roll
And
that
you
out.
work with those planning managers, so I could ask my planning manager what the forecast is for new spaces and how they're planning to achieve that.
Yes, we also have planning staff within Children's Services that work very closely with planning division staff to ensure that we are considering where the growth is and what the requirements are.
So for 1,000 new units in a contained area, at what point would you recommend that the city would say you can't approve that without a childcare center?
That's difficult to answer, Councillor. I think I would have to look at the areas that have least access and most demand and take it from there. But also I should reiterate that Gord Cleveland, when he did the growth and affordability study, looked very carefully at growth projections across the city right down to the neighbourhood level using all of the data that I mentioned. So the 30,000 estimate is a very sound number, we believe.
That's 30,000 what?
New spaces across the city by 2026. The
And does that relate to the current growth that's underway in the city?
Yes, it does.
And do you have that which is different than access to childcare?
Well, there's, that
As far as
reflects.
the map would be concerned, would you agree that might look a little different than that?
No, I think that map is showing the access to service at the neighborhood level. It's access to the physical spaces at the neighborhood level. So that's based on data. It just is what it is. We're not saying any one area is over or underserved. It's just showing you what the access is at this point in time.
So with all the new waterfront condos, with all the new, basically, South End condos, there still has not been a required increase of childcare spaces.
There's a number of new childcare spaces coming, childcare centres in the waterfront being developed through Section 37. So it is very much part of the secondary plans.
But the city does not have a requirement when building residential for that developer to include childcare. We don't have that, nor have we ever asked the province for that when we're having growth, since places to grow is their legislation. Is there anything in places to grow which recognizes, as we're adding density, that childcare needs to be built in, not through Section 37, but as part of the design of the neighborhood?
So I can't comment on places to grow, but I can comment that within our the various Toronto official plans, secondary plans, there are areas where it's clear that childcare is a priority and is included in the development. And I know, going back a number of years to my waterfront days, that it was very clearly spelled out in the secondary plan how many childcare centres would be required in each precinct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. Councillor Carroll.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. You guys have the most wonderful and indulgent rules here about accommodating late-breaking non-members. I just have one question, and I just checked that has not been covered, and it's about how you've allocated some of the new funds in the plan to administration. I found out this complaint, as always happens, I found out this complaint through my daughter, and then I came back to my office and they said, oh yes, Councillor, we take that complaint call all the time. Currently, and I gather over the 10-year plan, will it still be necessary, if you qualify for a subsidy, you will still have to go in person to update your qualification on an annual basis?
No, I'm so happy to say that. We are in the process of launching a parent portal,
Yes.
which is just beginning, but incrementally, parents will be able to update their information through the portal, apply for the fee subsidy through the portal, and submit their annual documentation through the portal. It won't be working tomorrow, but we're on it. It's part of our capital budget submission. And then it will really be taking more of a risk-based approach to which families should come in for a meeting, to focus more on planning their childcare journey as opposed to their eligibility for fee subsidy.
Right. So I'm wondering why then, I notice, I don't know if this is in capital or in operating, but I noticed that in terms of the admin, it's a small amount and a higher amount later. It's back-end loaded instead of front-end loaded. If right now you still have people needing to come and requalify, we do not have the funds to have any kind of easy access other than 1 day a week being open till 6 o'clock for people who have entry-level jobs and probably can't get there by 6 o'clock and get to the child care center and get their kid by 6 o'clock and make this appointment. Why would we not load the funds in now while we don't have the portal?
We are loading the funds in now, but it will take a couple of years to fully develop the portal. Part of it will roll out later this year, and we'll be adding services to it incrementally. It's just the time required to develop the software and put the systems in place. So it is part of our capital budget to be implemented over the next 2 years.
Okay, and last question. There still will be a need for some to come in, and as you say, families who you think may be at risk on some level. Is it possible? Is there some impediment? Is this a CBA impediment? Is there some reason why we can't have 1 day a week somebody who works from noon to 8 so that a person could pick up the child and then go make their appointment? Is there not a group of workers that would be willing to do that 1 day a week so that mothers could actually pull this meeting off?
In the past, we have done that, Councillor, and found that there just wasn't a great uptake, but it's certainly something we're happy to explore.
Possibly with increased spaces, that the volume the equation might change.
Possibly. And we'd never have one staff on alone. We'd always have at least 2 staffs. But in the past, there was not great uptake. It's certainly something we're happy to look at.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Is that it for questions for staff? Okay. Speakers? Are there any motions? Oh, yes, Councillor Davis. I'm sorry, I didn't see you there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know you appreciate my contribution every time I come here, and I always feel welcomed. I want to thank our staff for the report that is here. And as much as the childcare community has been overwhelmed with change over the last 5 years, so has our Children's Services Division. Everything from taking on the download of child and family centers to all-day kindergarten, school age, all of the changes that have come. In addition, we asked them to do this. We said, we want a plan. We want a plan for growth in the City of Toronto. And we want to be ready when the federal and provincial governments come to say, this is our plan in Toronto. We want to expand the number of licensed spaces so that there actually are centers out there. And we want to expand them in all areas of the city for all families. And that is significant about this report. Yes, we need to address affordability, and we need to do it in 2 ways. because of the current system. We need to make sure there are fee subsidies for families who are eligible. And there's a specific criteria, it's provincially set, and we have to abide by that system. But we have asked them to change it, and they are talking about changing it, and with this report, we're pushing them even further to talk about different ways to look at affordability. The other way we address affordability is we give direct operating funding to the childcare centers that underwrites the cost of every space, whether they're affordable, whether they are fee-paying parents or not, or subsidized parents or fee-paying parents. We also add capital money because we have to grow those spaces. And that operating money also addresses salaries because fees and salaries, as somebody said, are absolutely intertwined. So we are doing all of those things with this plan. And I don't think there's another municipality that has thought through, anywhere that has thought through how we can address making childcare accessible for all families and address affordability within the current system and expand it at the same time. I do have some concerns. The provincial government has given us $34 million, which is fabulous, and I thank them for that. But they have said we can only address affordability generally for non-subsidized families after we've invested in subsidies. So, as you can see on page 7, we are addressing now our target of achieving 40% of our spaces to be subsidized. We're halfway there almost with this phase 1. But we are only at 9% in terms of achieving our affordability targets at the end of this phase 1. So I hope at the end of 18, when the provincial and federal governments, whichever ones they are, Councillor Mahevik, and you are right, we've got to hold all 3 parties accountable to make sure that they can, 4 parties accountable. Yes, we saw what happened in BC. So that we can make sure that this commitment continues beyond 3 years. This has happened before. We've been very optimistic. We've planned for great expansion, and it's been canceled. So we do have to say, this is our plan. We want to move faster, and I hear Acorn, absolutely. It would be great to have $10 a day tomorrow. But when the fees right now for an infant space are over $100 a day, it's very hard to get to $10 a day as fast as we'd like. So we have to do some of everything. We've got to reform the system, fund the subsidies, put in capital to grow the system, and transform it to make sure that it is a different system for the future. Sliding scale available for all.
You could wrap up. Councillor Davis?
Chair, it wasn't 5.
It sure looks like 5 to me.
Anyway, so thank you again. I know that Councillor Wang Tam has a motion, and it's going to call for consultation on a number of things, including affordability, so that parents right across this city can have their voices heard once again, so that we build support leading up to the municipal budget, because we have committed 20%, and we will make sure that that 20% is there. And every one of the people who came here today will make sure that their councillors hear their voices in this budget process.
Thank you, Councillor Davis, for that moving address. Councillor Carroll, did I?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll be supporting when it makes its way to council the motion that you're going to be adding to the report today. I I raced down and raised the smaller issue that I raised, only because I want to make sure that in our quest to make things affordable, that we also continue to dedicate whatever we can to do all of the minor adjustments, the common sense adjustments that make it a workable system. The potential for poverty reduction in this program, married with all the other things that are available now, are so important. Moms can now walk into an OSAP office if they want to change things and go back to school and find they may be eligible for a grant that greatly reduces the amount of money they'd have to borrow. In many cases, they will now be eligible to go tuition-free, but they will still have the issues of childcare. But along with the issue of the affordability, we're making a system that will have more spaces to accommodate that, so that whole wraparound of get back to school, get the kids cared for, and become a viable breadwinner. They'll get lots of counseling on the kinds of jobs that are desperately needed right now, and so these are the areas you should focus your studies on in college. Will get them employed right away, but they will not enter the workforce in jobs where they can easily say, I'm taking the afternoon off, got to go do some stuff. They will not have those kinds of jobs despite having college educations. That's the lot of women, let's face it. But they will be on the path out of poverty. Anywhere we can tweak the system so that it not only provides the space but makes it a workable system is important. Just asking the question, I heard a receptiveness from staff immediately offline to addressing exactly this issue in the new world, and so I have confidence that it will be addressed in short order, but whether by pilot or whatever. But I just want to make sure that in the consultations with parents, we're listening to those little operational things, as well as listening to just that clarion call of we need more spaces, we need more spaces. Anything we can do to make it workable to change what are the systemic impediments to smoothly going from OW and rent geared to income to education to workforce, and being able to wisely use that subsidized space to create your own strong family model. We have to fix the systemic issues. So I'm happy to see the administrative expense in there as well, because I think the children's services caseworkers would love to have some of those impediments out of the way so they're not having to present them as, sorry, these are my rules. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Is anybody else? Councillor Wang, you have a motion?
Yes, I do. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, Madam Chair. I do
Whatever
have a
you
motion,
want.
Amending recommendation number 1 and including the language that we request the province consider adopting a geared to income sliding scale for childcare capped at $10 a day, which is essentially the ACORN campaign that was launched this morning, and to provide greater flexibility to municipalities in the use of provincial funding to expedite the reduction of childcare fees. I would also request that we amend recommendation number 4, and we do so by going out to having conversations with various stakeholders, including the childcare agencies, and talk about affordability options for licensed childcare, including developing a capital funding strategy and expansion plan, subsidy policies and funding changes to encourage increased access to childcare services for workers with part-time or non-standardized work hours. In a nutshell, what I'd like us to do as a committee is to really think holistically about our childcare, our approach to affordable, universally accessible childcare. I think there's a lot that we can said about the economic benefits of what happens when we do invest in childcare, and I think that it wasn't too long ago at the Economic Development Committee, there was a report that was co-signed not just by the General Manager of ECDA, but also by Elaine here, who was a General Manager of Children's Services. And what they said in that report is that for every dollar invested, you're going to get $1.50 to $3 back in terms of economic output. And this has been certainly quantified over and over again by research that's been done looking at what happened in Quebec. Of course, every single policy can be adopted very differently, considering the jurisdictions and the socio-economic environment. But one particular report that jumps out at me, and it was cited in that same report at ECDEV, is that you're going to get $200 million of economic contributions coming back to the provincial coffers by making that investment in childcare, which is what happened in the province of Quebec. So what we heard today were deputations about not just the need for affordable childcare, making sure that it's accessible, that it's fair, that it's going to be inclusive. What I think we also heard today is what happens when we don't do it. And what we don't do with that, when we don't do it, we missed opportunities. Working families aren't able to provide contributions to not just their community, but making sure that their child gets quality access to childcare, but they don't get to contribute into the workforce. They do not get to pay their proportionate taxes. They don't get to grow new incubators or tech companies or any of those things. There are women that don't get into the workforce. So over and over again, I think that there is a business case that can be made, is that if you get people access to childcare, they will no longer be receiving the social benefits on the other end, which is whether it's social welfare or perhaps subsidies then for affordable housing and so forth. So there's an economic multiplier effect that I think we need to ask the other orders of governments to consider, because while this country and this province and this city is on the pursuit of attracting knowledge workers, is on the pursuit of increasing women's participation in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, while we're trying to build ecosystems that grow up incubators and the tech sector, while we're trying to do all that, we put another foot on their neck and say, you stay home and you don't go to work. So those opportunities are afforded to some people and not to others. So then what's the point of those policies where we're trying to grow the economy, while we're trying to bring people into better living conditions, because it doesn't actually make any sense unless you actually look at the system holistically. And I think that staff need to be commended for coming up with this overall strategy. Councillor Davis is absolutely right. We're in a position to respond, but I would now like us to respond and go one step further. And that one step further is that affordability when it comes to childcare in Toronto is not where we need it to be. We have not achieved those levels where we can actually gain better participation opportunities for women and parent-led families. Childcare in Toronto is almost $1,700 a month, which makes us the most expensive place to place a child in childcare in the country. It is also the most expensive place to live. And we know that this has a very important to recognize gendered impact. In most cases, when you do have two parents, it's actually the woman who stays behind to take care of the child. So we're not going to be able to move forward as a country or compete competitively globally if we don't address this fundamental issue of childcare. And I hope that that's what we're going to do today, send a message to our colleagues at City Council, and then take this message and march it right over to Queen's Park and say we've got to do better. And the City of Toronto will be there at the table to work with ACORN and the other stakeholders to make sure that this becomes reality.
If you could wrap up, Councillor Wang Tam. I have a couple of questions for the mover. The $10 a day is an arbitrary figure taken from the province of Quebec model, is that?
I think I'm interested in exploring a very affordable cap. And yes, in this case, it could be said that it was inspired by Belle Provence. But I think we can also look back in that not too long ago, during the last federal election, we also had the federal NDP that promised a national daycare strategy capped at $15, regardless of what the quantum is. $7 in Quebec, $10 in Ontario, $15 across the country. I think everyone is saying the same thing, is that affordability is at a crisis point when it comes to childcare. We'll start with a $10 cap. But when we get to the table, we're willing to have that conversation.
It's my understanding that the cap in Quebec used to be $7, and it went up to
It's
10.
$7.30 right now.
The Quebec situation was very much driven by the nationalist cause to preserve and protect the French language, to encourage families to grow, to have more kids. Do you think the same revolutionary spirit is here in Ontario to get behind this?
I don't think it's I don't think it's actually a nationalist approach to increasing childcare. I think it's the right thing to do. There's business models that will say very similar things. I don't believe there's a BC nationalist movement, and yet the province of British Columbia is seriously looking at what a $10 cap would look like for their province. And I think what we do know is that childcare is a fundamental issue for families and struggling families to participate in the workforce.
No, we understand that. That's
Yeah.
fine. Okay, I just wanted to see where this came from. Any other questions for the deputant? Any other speakers?
Can I ask for a recorded vote then?
Sure.
Recorded vote on the amendment. All those in favor? Councillor Ford, Councillor Fletcher, Councillor Pasternak, Councillor Cressy, and Councillor Wang Tam, and Councillor Mihevik. That carries unanimously.
The item is amended. All those in favor?
Recorded vote? Just one more time. Makes us feel good.
Sure, recorded vote is fine.
All those in favor of the item as amended? Councillor Ford, Councillor Fletcher, Councillor Pasternak, Councillor Cressy, Councillor Wang Tam, and Councillor Mihevik.
Thank you.
We're going to jump back to item 1. Councillor Cressy, I understand you have a motion.
Thank you, Chair, and we can do this.
I have a quick question.
Oh, Councillor Wang Tam, I hear, has a question.
It's a very quick question
Questions
for
to staff?
staff. Yeah, I apologize. This is a question for staff regarding item number 1. And through you, Mr. Chair, in the report regarding the newcomer youth recreation forum, it said that during the consultation that the ongoing themes of intersectionality and youth engagement were quite prominent. What specifically about intersectionality and ongoing engagement that the youth want to speak about? Because there's one sentence in there, I just want to pull it out a bit.
Well, she was late. We called on her. Councillor Wang Tam, have you asked your question?
I did ask my question.
And are there staff here to answer it?
Yes,
Okay, so we're waiting for an answer.
Through the chair. The primary sort of theme around intersectionality is just the idea that newcomer youth you might approach as rather than approaching it from a single dimension, that we need to be mindful of the many identities that an individual has, and that they shouldn't just be defined by the fact that they are newcomers to Canada. So as we think about access to recreation and services that youth are interested in, the part of the idea around co-design is that we need to work with youth around those various identities that they have, and ensuring that services are as responsive as they can be to those many different experiences that they bring with them.
And in the recreation strategy, is it not already embedded in that work that you're going to address the concept of intersectionality, that just people are not going to experience the service delivery in exactly the same way based on who they are, their social locations, based on who's designing the program and for whom?
I would say that's embedded in all of the work that we do, absolutely.
And how is that measured? How do you measure that you've done that work?
I think part of what things like this forum, surveys, how we engage with you through our various youth councils to know that we're continuing to, move the bar with respect to, the way in which services are planned, delivered, in the lenses that we're using.
And so if we were to do a canvass of the city staff who are delivering this service and ask them about ongoing youth engagement and the framework of service delivery as it relates to intersectionality, they would be able to respond to that successfully?
I believe so. I think, staff did actually attend the forum and present on some of the strategies that they are taking, particularly youth outreach workers in this case, to engage youth from various communities and interests and feel that we are making great strides in that regard.
Then how am I to read this report when youth are saying that intersectionality and authentic and ongoing engagement were still two prominent themes? If we're doing such a great job in those two realms, how is it identified by youth that they want more of this?
I think that it's an ongoing conversation. It's a journey that you never fully reach, and so part of what the intention around this forum was being able to continue to do deep dives with the needs of youth in the City of Toronto, particularly newcomer youth. Those things that we're doing successfully, those things that we need to continue to build capacity in, and then setting up the right tables to have those ongoing conversations moving forward.
Thank you.
Okay, that's it for questions for staff. Councillor Cressy, I understand you have a motion.
I do have a motion. It can be put on the screen. Just very briefly, members of this committee will recall that about a year and a half ago, we directed staff to work with Social Planning Toronto and others to address issues relating to access for newcomer youth. I'm glad that there have been many conversations and that talk is in fact continuing. I think we all collectively realize that there's much more to be done. Ultimately, that a strategy that's implemented and successfully done in collaboration between PFNR, the newcomer office, and the civic sector is where we need to go. And my motion here is to ensure that we continue to work towards that path as we seek to devise solutions. And with that, I'm happy to move it. Thank you.
We're taking a look at the motion. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item number 3, S.H. Armstrong Pool Working Group. Sarah Earhart. I do apologize for the wait. Thank you very much for coming. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much for having me. I wanted to put something up on the screen. I'm not quite sure how to use this. Does it, just put it on? Okay, I'll start with a picture. See how that goes. Can you, other way? Okay, there we go. How's that? Okay. So thanks very much for having me. And I wanted to start just by reading the letter that the community members have put together in support of the staff recommendations. So we are the community members of the S.H. Armstrong Pool Working Group. We would like to echo the final staff report that has made a strong recommendation to bridge pool programming for the winter session at S.H. Armstrong Community Centre. Since our pool reopening was announced, our community came together and worked with city staff and the TDSB to reach out across social media, school and community centres, farmers markets, health centres, local buses, nearby shelters, and community housing, all with a focus on aligning programming to community needs and raising awareness that the pool programming had returned. This fall saw over 550 people register for our community pool, more than double any previous session, confirming our community's ongoing interest and commitment in the S.H. Armstrong pool. We are incredibly proud, in particular, to see the number of young children and vulnerable adults that are now accessing crucial Learn to Swim programming and healthy recreation opportunities. Through our community outreach, we have learned that although our community lies steps from Lake Ontario, there are many who still do not know how to swim, a crucial life skill that we view as a right, not a privilege, of every person in this city. We see this staff recommendation as essential for keeping up momentum. At this stage, a disruption in programming would have a substantial negative community impact and would affect the progress we've made in outreach to vulnerable populations, particularly to newcomer women, youth, and vulnerable adults who are now beginning to access these critical city programs. As outlined in our previous submission to this committee, we remain of the view that city funding to S.H. Armstrong Pool should be reinstated on a permanent and ongoing basis. We feel that the continued city investment in this aquatic community hub and shared resource is an important and cost-effective contribution to enhancing the safety and quality of life of the many and diverse residents of our community. We would ask that in line with staff recommendations, programming continue at S.H. Armstrong into the winter session. We would also request that our working group continue to work together as needed throughout 2018. Since forming in May 2017, our working group has fostered linkages across our diverse community, city staff, and the TDSB to refine programming in line with community needs and to make modest facility improvements. We have areas for future work and see a need for a continued working group structure to facilitate collaboration across the many stakeholders that form part of the S.H. Armstrong Duca Connaught community. And so thank you again. And just to follow up, I'll also put here, let's make sure I put this up correctly. You can just, this is going to be hard to see, but in the right-hand column, you'll be able to see what programs were offered in spring of 2017, around the time that council had made its decisions related to the future of our pool. You can see in the left-hand columns that go across both sides what was just offered this fall. We're now at 80% utilization with so many more programs. There are so many people coming to our pool now. I'm really grateful to staff that worked so hard with us to promote these programs, even though they did not appear in the fund guide. We flyered, I myself went in conjunction with staff to Toronto Community Housing near the pool. I also served as a guest speaker to a tenant rep meeting. We were able to get 20% participation through the welcome policy within our pool. And the pool, it's a bustling place now. It's come back to life. Like, it's really been such a positive thing for our community. And I know that when you see me coming, because this isn't my first time here deputing, you might just think that it's uppity Leslieville moms that are the ones using this pool. I really want to emphasize that the whole community is now using this pool. On Monday nights in particular, we've started adult swim programs. I've gone to see what's happening. It's a largely racialized population that is accessing these adult learn to swim programs. I saw a father and son duo both learning to swim together, which to me is incredibly heartwarming. I've giggled in the change room with a group of new immigrant women who I'm getting to know. I know this committee has such a weighty and serious responsibility in the city at large around newcomers, around refugees, around child poverty. And our swimming pool in the Greenville-Coxwell corridor, which is a rapidly changing and gentrifying area, our community pool is a tool of social cohesion, an essential tool for social cohesion. And we're seeing that right now with the growth in numbers and the true diversity of participation. And I really want to see us keep that up. We've got lots more to do. Hope Shelter's coming online this winter. We've done really great outreach with Red Door, and there's some ideas for targeted programming. We want to see all that continue. So I just ask that you adopt the city's recommendations today. And thanks again to this committee and to city staff for working with us on this success. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Fletcher?
Can you just tell me again, you went to the, TCHC has two fairly significant buildings just very close to S.H. Armstrong. You went to the tenant meeting?
Yeah, we actually went to a regional tenant rep meeting for the entire East End,
Yes.
where we had, I think, around 12 tenant reps in attendance. We gave out flyers, discussed how to access welcome policy funds, addressed any questions, also promoted the adult Learn to Swim programs, which are new, highlighted the girls-only programming that's being offered, and Girls Only Learn to Swim on Thursday nights. We addressed questions, and I was also led into the buildings and flyers, 3 nearby buildings. And we did this in partnership with staff. We made a marketing plan, and we jointly delivered on it, the staff and the community.
And so there's a 20% uptake in the welcome policy at SH?
Yeah, so 20% of this, it's over 550 participants. They've told us that 20% access the welcome policy. And in part, that's interesting because SH Armstrong is one of the community centers that opens at 8 a.m. for registration. And so the online program opens at 7. The physical structure opens at 8, and so low-income people are at a disadvantage in that kind of structure because the first hour they can't register. So we still got 20% even with that barrier, and that's something as a group that we're brainstorming. You know, there's lots on the go so that we can make sure that everyone can use our pool.
So you've been very thoughtful. This wasn't in the fund guide, and yet you have this many people coming in. So you had a very strong marketing plan that you worked out in collaboration with city staff that were assigned to this committee.
Exactly. We flyered local farmers markets. As a community, we were able to host info tables at city-sponsored farmers markets, which was great. We were able to have free offerings there. City staff worked with all nearby schools, including those in other district school boards that do not have pools, and all students were given a package so that they were kept informed of registration. And we'll have to do that again this winter. With this committee and council support to bridge programming, programs will be offered, but we will again not be in the fund guide. In the future with the fund guide, things will be easier, but we have a plan to market again, and a lot of families are keen to use the pool again. With the new numbers, it feels like you're going into a living and vibrant place. And so, you know, success begets success, and we really want to keep that success happening in our community center. Like, we've got a lot of ideas to keep making it great.
And you got the temperature up.
Yeah, the temperature, I should say, that's a fantastic example of why the working group structure that this committee and that council passed was so effective. Having both the city and TDSB at the table and Toronto Lands Corporation, when we held a community meeting to discuss challenges, we had all the necessary players at the table to work out solutions. And so we've done things like facility walkthroughs, and when people see that their concerns are being listened to, you know, sometimes it takes a little bit of time to make the things happen, but when people see that their concerns are being heard, it creates in itself a momentum. And so the temperature was a great example where the school had been keeping the pool at 78 degrees Fahrenheit. City tends to prefer more 84, 85 degrees Fahrenheit for these kinds of facilities. We passed a motion. Our trustee took that to the TDSB. The pool temperature is now 82 degrees, which is considered adequate for the use for children. So there were some real barriers previously that sort of created a loss of momentum around this pool, but we've been able to create an increase in momentum, which is good news for everyone.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. Any other questions for the deputant? No? Thank you very much.
Thanks again for your time.
Questions for staff? Councillor Fletcher.
I just want to be clear, this motion...
Is your mic on?
Oh. Sorry about that. This motion is now to have the pool bridged until it gets back in the budget. Is that what we're doing here today?
Through the chair, that's correct.
And I'm assuming that you're not recommending to take it out of the 2018 budget.
Through the chair, council directed us to put it in the 2018 budget for consideration.
So it'll be
as
in
it will be.
Consideration. And it's now at an 80% utilization with about 250 more people in it. Do you consider that a success story?
We would.
Very good. And so I understand that it's been a great experience for everyone, including city staff and the community. Is this a kind of a good model for when we start to see utilization dip at a pool?
Through the chair, I think, you know, I can speak for Mr. Dayton and staff with us, that it's a great example of staff working together with the community to mobilize and promote programs and come up with some new program options. And the response has been very, very positive and overwhelming, and has really turned around the participation at this particular location.
Great. So once basically, and I think Ms. Earhart needs to hear that, is that it's in for 18, we're bridging to get you there with the winter program. And so she can take that back.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. Any other questions for staff? Speakers?
I'm going to move the recommendation and as well thank everybody that's been involved in the working group. And as Sarah has told us, and also thank the members of the working group, Sarah Earhart and Angie Law, the others who have been really front and center for making this happen, and to Aidan and his staff from the swim program. It's been a really collaborative venture. It's been actually very exciting to see them come up with all of these ideas. Imagine going to the TCHC Regional Tenant Council, talking about the swim programs, finding that we have a 20% welcome policy take-up at SH Armstrong. And then also you'll remember that there's shelters in the neighborhood, and there's ongoing conversations with how the new men's shelter will be able to access this pool, how Red Door, which is up the street, how those families, most of them that are new and refugee families, would be able to access swimming and learn to swim. And the TCHC becoming more involved. Apple Grove having an AOC on site has been very good, because they have a very broad outreach into the community that quite often our staff in centers don't. So to my mind, this has been out of a really desperate situation and difficult one of putting this on the chopping block for its, I'll remind you, 69.4% utilization rate. And I would say not as many swimmers as there could be. This is just an amazing outcome in turning this to a 80% utilization, over 500 people, and really bringing it back to life. And really getting the temperature up in a pool from the TDSB is quite a feat. That doesn't happen very often. So everyone's there at the table. This is just a great model to check in with those school pools, with those surrounding neighborhoods. And I think that having SDFA involved, I don't know when she's there, Costanza involved in that at the beginning, and looking at all of the who stayed there at the table with rec staff, that's a very good model, because it is a broad community model. So I just want to thank Sarah for coming today, and sorry you had to wait, and to pass along our really deep thanks and congratulations to every single member of the working group and everyone who fought so hard to get this pool going again. We're very proud of the work that you've done, and we're very proud of the results in our great team effort here at SH Armstrong.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher, and congratulations on your local advocacy to save this pool. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Cressy.
Thank you. I just want to begin by thanking the local councillor, Councillor Fletcher, and our city staff for the hard work on this file. But in particular, and we heard it from the deputation, I want to commend the local neighborhood. That this is an example of community building at its best, and it's community building in that it is inclusive community building and building a true neighborhood. And in that sense, I would say to the deputant that you guys are certainly anything but uppity Leslieville mums as described, but rather inclusive community builders, because that is what this is. And to everyone involved, a huge thank you and congratulations.
Thank you, Councillor Cressy. Those were very brief remarks. Most welcome. Just a reminder that I have to go to a speaking engagement at lunchtime. So we're getting towards the end of the agenda, but a decision will have to be made on whether to continue, whether you have quorum, and so forth. Okay, the item before us is the SH Armstrong Working Group final report. I'll move. Councillor Fletcher is moving the recommendation. All those in favor?
All those in favor, Councillor Ford, Councillor Fletcher, Councillor Pasternak, Councillor Cressy, and Councillor Wang and Councillor Mihevik. The motion carries 6 in favor.
Okay, item 6, we have a speaker. This is Toronto Early Year and Child Care Services, projected center closures 2018. Tim McGuire. Thank you, Mr. McGuire, for coming. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. I will attempt to be succinct, giving our timelines, and you might lose quorum, and this is a very important matter. So I'm here to say that we're happy that the child care growth strategy is moving forward, moved further forward this morning, the result of that discussion. Local 79 has been working with allies for many years on this issue, so we're happy this is moving forward. However, when we're also here to talk about potential childcare closures. When childcare centers close, even temporarily, it impacts on neighborhoods and families. Before you, there are 2 childcare centers with some closure, even if for some time. The Davisville Early Learning Center and the Lawrence East Early Learning Childcare Center. Davisville is being closed due to school redevelopment, and the spaces will be not replaced until at least 2020. The Lawrence East is closing in preparation for a larger and more suitable center opening, but that's not until later, not until a year later. Closing these centers will reduce the city's childcare capacity by 67 spaces for a period of time. The staff report indicates that the city will help find alternative childcare for the children that remain in centers at the closure. When centers close, families are disrupted. The continuity of care for their children is disrupted, even when alternative care is found at some point. So we're recommending the following. 1 is that when centers are slated for closure, the city needs a concrete plan to ensure that the children currently receiving care will be moved to accessible, affordable, quality care nearby, and that the closure will not result in increasing unmet demand for childcare in the area over the short, medium, or long term. We're asking that staff report back prior to the 2018 budget on those plans so we can assure that these children are not unduly disrupted by these closures. So the closures are happening. All we're asking is that a plan be made transparent in terms of how these children are going to be cared for. And secondly, we're recommending that the city review opportunities to expand directly operated childcare through the real estate review and assess the possible expansions of current sites under that review.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions for the deputant?
And I missed your deputation, so I probably shouldn't be asking you questions, but I
If you'd like to
will.
withdraw your question, that'd be most welcome.
I just wanted to ask
Are you asking what I said in my deputation?
one of the things that we did some years ago when the Best Start program was approved and there was going to be significant expansion, we said explicitly that we would have growth in the directly operated centers as part of that growth. And I'm wondering whether or not that is something that you've had discussions at all with Children's Services about.
We've not had direct discussions with Children's Services about that, but the first point I made was that there should be a transparent plan in terms of what's happening to the children as a result of closures. But the second point is that the city, as a part of its real estate review, should look at where centers could be established and as a part of that part of that plan to expand. Yeah. City directly operated care is an anchor for childcare in the city. We think we should plan forward to how that would continue and expand.
And I presume you would support a perspective that I think is going to come this morning, which is that no center should close until there is an alternative service available. I presume that's going to happen.
Yes, we would be fully in support of such a direction. When this happens, there's disruption, whether it's temporary or long-term closures. There's disruption to children, to families, to communities, and there should be a parent plan in place.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Davis. Any other questions for the deputant? No? Thank you very much, Mr. McGuire. Any questions for staff on item 6? Councillor Cressy.
So just a few questions. So the Davisville Early Learning and Child Care Center, so do I understand correctly that there is money, funds have been allocated to continue on this work if a new site was identified before the replacement school came online?
The budget for Davisville, it remains in our anticipated 2018 budget simply because at the time of the report, we did not, and the time of budget submission, we did not know whether or not the school would be closing.
So if I had a motion that I was taking a motion from Councillor Matlow, which I was taking carriage of, instructing you to work with the local councillor, the parent community, and the TDSB to identify an interim facility, that's something that you would support?
Yes, we could support that.
Now, let me understand, the Lawrence East, we just heard a deputation related to that. Would staff support looking at an interim facility for Lawrence East, or is this different than Davisville?
It's quite different than Davisville in that it only offers a kindergarten and school age program, so it's a before and after school program with the facility remaining vacant during the day. Our priority here is to try to get those programs moved into schools so that it's a more seamless day for children. And then when the new Lawrence opens up at the end of 2018, it will serve infants through to preschool children. So it will expand capacity. But the preference really for these children is that they receive their before and after school care in the schools that they attend.
And what kind of certainty for this committee would we have that arrangements are made with those kids, with the parents, that they will have that care in place?
We would begin discussions immediately, but we likely wouldn't have confirmation until May.
Okay, thank you.
I'll be quick. Yes,
Councillor Davis.
thank you. So with the Lawrence East Center, it is in a TCHC building. And once again, there's concern about the facility's state of good repair. Will there be any break in service between when you move out of this center and when there is a kindergarten and school age program in the school?
I can't answer that until May, Councillor Davis. If there was a break in service, we would be working with the families individually to find alternative care.
No, why, so you're not committing to keep this center open until there is an alternative service?
We were asked to report on potential closures, and this is clearly one of them. If council wanted us to continue to operate until there was school-age programs, that's certainly a motion that would be up to council. Our recommendation is that we begin working immediately with the boards to transition these children to before and after school care in their actual schools. We're finding it's not an efficient use of the real estate. It's lying empty for 6 to 7 hours per day. And in the end, we cannot make this space AOD compliant. So it's only a matter of time before we would have to move out of the facility.
So the proposal here is you're going to move the kindergarten and school-age children into a local school, but I thought the school didn't have kindergarten and school age.
Well, that's why we're working with the boards to encourage them to offer a before and after school program within the school, and that's why we won't have confirmation that they will do that until May, although we'll be beginning discussions immediately.
So if there was a motion to say maintain the kindergarten and school age operations until an alternative program is operational, you could do that.
We could do that. It's just not very efficient, but we could do that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Any other questions for staff? No? Speakers? Councillor Cressy?
Yes, and I have a motion, if it can be put on the screen. This is actually a motion from Councillor Matlow that I'm taking carriage of. And through the local councillors' hard work with the parent community, the TDSB, the general manager at Children's Services, this is to ensure that the funds that are already allocated, that we use those to ensure that there is an interim site and facility in place while the school is under construction. And I'm confident in speaking with staff and hearing their answers that this can get done, and certainly with a local councillor who's known for being rather diligent on these matters, I'm certain that we'll be able to find a way. Thank you.
Any other speakers on the matter? Any questions for the mover? None? I will have to hold the item down then. Do you have someone to take carriage of it? Okay, we're going to have to hold that item down. Go to item 9 because we have a deputy in waiting. Strengthening Rexdale Community Hub Board governance. Is Alex Doe here? Thank you very much for coming. You have 5 minutes.
Sure. Thank you for having me. This is my first time formally deputing. My name's Alex Dow. Thank you again, councillors, for having me. I'm the director of our Strong Neighborhood Strategy at United Way Toronto and York Region. So work closely with many of the teams here at City Hall, and also on the ground and in community. So I just want to speak to the fact that Rexdale Hub is a vital community asset in Northwest Toronto, and it's critical for the well-being and success of the area's residents there. And I'll just share a few facts and figures just about that particular community hub. It is the largest community hub that the United Way currently funds in partnership with the city. There's 44,000 square feet of rental space available for a variety of community agencies to deliver primary care programs and services, as well as other programs and services. There's youth programs, there are seniors programs, there's a legal aid clinic, there are employment services, newcomer services, and many more types of programs and services to support the needs of the community. United Way's investment to date in that facility, so that's the hub in particular and not necessarily all the agencies that are in the hub. We've dedicated $2.6 million in the capital construction of the hub. In terms of operating funds that go to Rexdale Community Hub's board, we've invested $1.3 million to date. Additional kind of one-time or special project funds, we've invested almost $250,000 in those types of one-time or special projects. We've committed about $350,000 for the next fiscal year, 2018-19. Plus, we also will kind of look at how our campaign does in terms of additional special or one-time initiatives. That particular hub has seen approximately 2.3 million visits by local residents, which is an amazing number and certainly outperforms a number of our other community hubs. And United Way currently funds 4 agency tenants in that hub with an additional 3,500 square feet of dedicated space for community members and grassroots groups to be able to meet and address and tackle local issues. Residents are also engaged in all aspects of the governance of the hub. We really just want to highlight that this hub, again, critical to the community's ability to address issues that they want to face, as well as bringing the vital services that they require in a one-stop shop, which is why we know hubs are so useful and important to various communities, especially communities identified as neighborhood improvement areas. variety of the services. We know that Rexdale Community Health Center just opened, and so now we've kind of got the full slate of services fully operating now in the hub as of a few weeks ago. When the hub celebrated their 5th anniversary, the Community Health Center expanded their services, and they're now fully operating on the ground floor, as well as other spaces in the building. We know that in terms of strengthening our neighborhood improvement areas, resident engagement is a critical component of that, and so the hub really focuses on that, and United Way puts a lot of additional resources in addition to social development, finance, and administration to support resident engagement in the space and resident leadership. And we know that this particular hub is going to be a really, it's only going to grow in its ability to address community challenges. We know the Finch West LRT is going to be linking that particular hub to the rest of the city. And so neighborhoods that are kind of along the Finch West corridor are going to only get more and greater access to such an amazing facility. So we really, again, just want to emphasize our joint collaborative work in supporting this particular community asset and how important it would be to the sustainability of the facility to enter into the agreement with the city.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the deputant? Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you.
Questions for staff? Speakers? Who would like to move the recommendation? Councillor Ford moves the staff recommendation. All those in favor? That is carried. We can go to number 10. We also have a deputant, Alex Dow is back. Review and identification of resources for Toronto Strong Neighborhood Strategy. 2020. Thank you once again. You have 5 minutes.
Sure, I'll be a little bit more brief on this particular item, and I think kind of, again, what I wanted to speak to from United Way's perspective is just to highlight again the collaboration with the city on our mutual strong neighborhood strategies and the importance of Toronto Strong Neighborhoods 2020 in being able to close the gap between neighborhoods that we know exists with a number of the neighborhood improvement areas in the city, a number of which are, of course, in the inner suburbs. And overall, that the Toronto Strong Neighborhood Strategy and a well-resourced and strong Toronto Neighborhood Strategy 2020 positions the city and United Way to enhance the great work that we do collaboratively. Over the past decade, of course, we've made great strides with our mutual strong neighborhood strategies. We've collaboratively built resident leadership, expanded programs and services in neighborhoods, built a number of new spaces in community, new infrastructure, including a number of hubs in the former priority neighborhoods and across the inner suburbs. And of course, this wouldn't have been possible without this deep collaboration. The city has accelerated its momentum in terms of working its TSNS 2020, now incorporating an evidence-based urban heart. They're taking a holistic approach to look at not only the physical environment, but health, economic opportunity, all of these other factors that really support a strong and healthy community. The city intentionally works not only with us, but with community agencies and residents to make sure that we can maximize local impact. And of course, the city has been very intentional about aligning Strong Neighborhoods 2020 with other strategies. Many of those other strategies, United Way is also collaborating with the city to address. As the city develops its implementation plan for the next couple of years, we're confident that we can continue to work together to make real progress through our strong partnership. And we know that a place-based strategy such as Toronto Strong Neighborhoods 2020 is kind of recognized as best practice for addressing the gap between neighborhoods. And we see that with other levels of government adopting a place-based lens to some of their funding. Toronto Strong Neighborhoods 2020 also ensures that we're mobilizing the funding and resources necessary to a number of these neighborhoods. And so in the memo, you will see some of the resources that United Way leverages in priority neighborhoods. I think it's in the area of $11 to $12 million, for neighborhood improvement areas. Hubs are also a critical piece of our collaborative work, so I'll speak a little bit kind of more generally about our hubs. We've worked collaboratively on 7 so far, and we have 125 partners that locate in those hubs, but also come in and deliver services. And we see as a good example of where we are able to get other levels of government to move funding to support them. CIC, for example, funds 12 organizations within our shared 7 hubs and mobilizes those resources to support newcomers. And so we've, in terms of infrastructure that we built together, with respect to those 7 hubs, we've built about 170,000 square feet of space. And those are just the ones that United Way and the city has worked together on so far that are built. And there are, of course, others that the city works on their own and others that we'll work on together, such as Thorncliffe in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the deputant? Councillor Wang Tam?
Yes, thank you, and thank you for your deputation. I'm always very interested in when I hear the United Way speak about strong neighborhoods, and I rarely ask questions that are specific to my ward, but I'm just going to be that type of councillor at the moment. I represent the downtown east, which includes Moss Park, and on the other side of Sherbourne, which is a boundary that I share with Ward 28, sort of bleeds into Regent Park. Rarely, if ever, do I see any reports about the downtown east and Moss Park and the tremendous needs that are there. Why is that?
I think, I think this city staff might be able to better address that question, but I know in the report, like Regent Park and in terms of downtown wards, Regent Park and Parkdale are now considered neighborhood improvement areas, and so there should be reflections of that in the report. In terms of the numbers that we provided the city, in terms of our investments, we did include like that $11–12 million includes United Way's investments in agencies that operate programs and services in Regent Park and Parkdale. We are looking at the city's neighborhood improvement areas and having ongoing conversations internally in United Way to look at how we evolve our original kind of strong neighborhoods work.
Do you consider Moss Park as part of the sort of the neighborhood catchment of Regent Park?
So for United Way, we're still working with the original priority neighborhoods in some way, but obviously our overall agency funds a number of agencies that operate downtown. Right, so we have multiple strategies, and our funding comes from a number of different places. So we are still funding, or we have a lot of funding that is going to a number of downtown wards and downtown agencies. So we do fund agencies in Regent Park. Yeah.
And so there comes the word Regent Park again. What about Moss Park?
So it's not specific to my portfolio, but I could get you that information.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Great.
Thank you, Councillor Wang Tam. Councillor Davis.
Could you summarize the changes that the United Way has made in terms of consolidation and funding so that we understand it?
Sure. So United Way's gone from a member agency model to a what we call, we're trying to be a community impact funder. And so we are now looking at 62 anchor agencies, which will be from 2018 onwards, like they've been selected.
Yes?
The information is accessible on the website in terms of what those agencies are, and they represent neighborhoods across Toronto and York Region, including downtown, and also sector players like Social Planning Toronto, and folks like that.
And how many agencies were core funded before?
We had about 200 agencies before, but in addition, I didn't get to mention, in addition to our anchor-funded agencies, we have a new stream that's currently being reviewed for program funding. And so, so we're still kind of ongoing in our process, but our program funding will be the mechanism through which we're able to continue to fund many of those agencies.
So the number one issue we hear about all the time and we experience is ongoing core funding and predictability and for agencies. So you've gone from 200 to 62 that are now, so that's a lot of agencies that are no longer going to have ongoing core funding. So are they going to go from project to project?
So we're looking at either 3 to 5 year commitments, I believe, in program funding, but we also support agencies with their administration. So that's really a core thing that we do believe in. So even if you're program funded, you would be able to access a bit of, you know, you can design your budgets in a way that support not just the actual project delivery pieces.
Okay, so the program funding will allow for ongoing administrative costs outside of that, not attributed specifically to that project, but to this core costs of administration?
The agencies are able to set it up the way that they see fit. They'll have to kind of write their applications, but they would defend how they see those funds being allocated.
Okay,
I think.
I guess what I'm worried about is there are agencies that now are going to be basically unfunded, and I'm wondering what strategy there is to ensure that those services that they provide can continue.
Yeah, so we've continued our commitment to agencies throughout this transition period. I think we've recognized also that you know there's a dual challenge. There is to bringing on new programs and services and new partnerships, right? Which the old model wasn't as flexible around, and so it's not that the old system per se was a perfect system. And so we are very intentional about our collaboration with the city and other funders. Whenever there is a change in any sort of funding or any agency's status, like if an agency is closing, for example, for other reasons, or under any type of management, or there's any type of risk to programs and services, we tend to convene conversations with all the funders that support that agency or that would support that program to make sure that those services are still available to the
Before
community.
we're on the brink of closures and dealing with them on the 11th hour, I presume that there is, I'll ask Chris too, whether there is a plan for not having them just end up coming to the city to save them. I mean, I hope there's some plan to deal with the impact that you must know is going to come.
Yeah, I think we've outlined a number, and again, this particular piece of work isn't entirely my bailiwick.
Okay.
But we do have a number of steps. We're in ongoing conversation with agencies. We're making sure that all of those agencies that were the original 220 are applying and are knowledgeable of the application process, are seeking coaching and support from the staff to be able to access those resources. We've committed to that transition period, as I mentioned, to make sure that the programs and services are stable, and then we connect with other funders.
What provincial money are we getting now?
That's your last question.
There was money, and then it was Youth Challenge Fund money, and then it was, I mean, what provincial money is going to strong neighborhoods?
That's really a question to staff.
Okay.
Any other questions for the deputant? No? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Questions for staff? Councillor Mihevc?
Yes, thank you. We've been around the block a few times on developing neighborhood action plans, neighborhood priority areas, and so on. And, you know, I don't want to be parochial either. But, you know, so if I could contextualize this a little bit, so there is a question here, there really is a question here. You know, we have a plan around water, and the water plan addresses all parts of the ward, and then it prioritizes these are the places where we need to develop special areas of concern. We have the same thing around roads. We have the same thing around public transit, all areas. Around neighborhoods, and you know, Toronto is a city of neighborhoods, we focus on only the ones, while strong priority is given to the ones where there is deep need. And I am so good with that. I'm not trying to in any way take away anything from this whatsoever. However, it is also, it's an and, it's not a but, it's an and. Do we not also need to be saying to, say, Councillor Wang, or I'll speak for myself, you know, what's happening in Ward 21? Like, what are the challenges? What are the opportunities? Is there anything that we're missing in this particular area? And I'll give you an example. Like, my area is actually doesn't even come close to the kinds of needs that are present here. However, you know what? I didn't know this, but along Vaughan Road, Raglan, Bathurst, there is a very strong community of Filipino seniors, strongest in the city of Toronto. And guess what? 70 to 80% of them, when they retire, they enter poverty. They enter poverty. I need to find a way to address that. And I don't want to be seen when there is an opportunity, because there's a library expansion or a new building is going in, to have to say, I want to be an exception. I don't want to be an exception. I need a document that staff produces that says, you know what, there's an opportunity here, and this can link with that. That's very place-based, very specific in Ward 1 and Ward 21. And I'm sure Councillor Wang has one of them. I'm sure Joe has one of them, even as we're not in this. So I guess, and I do have a motion, and I want, though, to give staff an opportunity to comment. Is this not approach, while very good in identifying core deep need, not helpful in determining modest, very specific need in other neighborhoods? That's my question.
Council approved the Toronto Strong Neighbourhood Strategy 2020 based on a fact-based analysis of resident outcomes across the city and identified the 31 neighbourhood improvement areas. So Council basically prioritized those areas based on need. Where we can, through my division, through other divisions at the city, when other areas of the city not in a neighborhood improvement area are identified as being in particular need or having a particular opportunity, we do our best within the resources available to respond. Examples would be Central Etobicoke, where we have been working with the local community to identify needs. The Downtown West service review, and work with our colleagues in shelter support and housing around shelter location. But Councillor, it's really resource dependent. We get as far out as we can with the resources available. Is it covering every opportunity in the city? Certainly not.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mihevc. Any other questions for staff? Councillor Wang.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you for your question. Your answer to Councillor Mihevc's question. I just want to take it one step further. With respect to the areas of need that were adopted by council, who put forth those recommendations and areas?
There was a process using something called the Urban Heart, which was developed by the World Health Organization as a way of identifying sub-geographies within an urban area of relative priority. We worked with the Center for Research in Inner City Health, other funding partners to create that. It came to council for review and approval while it was being created. We then ran the analysis, identified the neighborhoods, that came to council. The thing that was different about that approach was it was measuring resident outcomes. Wasn't measuring the number of services they had access to, but it literally measured how well they were doing on health, income, social, physical environment outcomes. The goal is to get all Toronto neighborhoods to the same level of outcome.
Would you say that based on those qualifications and the criteria that move forward, knowing what we now know about certain neighborhoods, neighborhoods that are affected by a strong, sort of a growing population of individuals who required mental health supports, a increased number of people who are now street involved, sleeping rough, homeless, an increased number of individuals that are now self-medicating through alcohol or perhaps drugs, largely due to the opiate crisis. If you were to put that same lens over the areas that you originally measured today, that you did the work in 2012, do you think some of those outcomes would be different?
I wouldn't want to presuppose the analysis. We will be running the Urban Heart analysis again in 2019. The reason for the timing has to do with the refresh of data to make the process useful. I would absolutely agree with you, Councillor, that the Downtown East is experiencing a different form of challenge or a nature of challenge, and that the nature of that challenge has increased over the last few years.
And so, that's important to know. Thank you very much for that. I want to understand with respect to a lot of the services that the designated neighborhood improvement areas are getting or they're planned to be receiving.
Did I start afresh?
Given the population density in the Downtown East, given the fact that we've got one community center, but we've got 1,300 shelter beds, the fact that our parks are overflowing with people who have no place to go because of the lack of programming, how do we reconcile that? Because this is not exactly a brand new condition that exists in the Downtown East in the Moss Park neighborhood. This is something that's been there for 10, 15, 20 years, if not more, and yet it was missed during the 2012-2013 assessment. Like somehow this neighborhood did not get captured as a neighborhood of need.
So the Urban Heart tool is designed to account for variations in density and location. So the geography of the units is much smaller downtown than a neighborhood would be in a suburban location, and that reflects the density. At the end of the day, it was a measurement of how well people are doing in terms of outcomes. And although it may be hard to see in parts of the Downtown East, the population in those neighborhoods as a whole, other than Regent Park, are doing better than other parts of the city. That's the fact base in terms of the actual individual outcomes that people are demonstrating.
But if I compare the Downtown East to other neighborhoods that I represent in Ward 27, they're not doing well. Would you agree?
Agreed. It's a relative measure. So it's not to say that in the Moss Park area or the Church Street corridor, there aren't significant issues. There absolutely are. But in the measurement compared of all of the people in those areas, not just the street-involved people, their outcomes relative to other parts of the city were still better.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wang. Any other questions for staff? Speakers?
Between community development officer and a community development worker. I didn't know we had two kinds of jobs.
Community Development Officer is a senior position, and that position has the ability to provide functional supervision and lead teams in a different way. A Community Development Worker is a junior position. For example, it's a Community Development Worker position that supports the Toronto Youth Cabinet and the Seniors Forum.
One of the things I've always asked about is we get our grants and we're targeting grants that we have through the grants program to the priority areas. And I've always said, where are we and how are we increasing the range of services like recreation, like library services, all those services that are needed? Are they being, how are we adding those kinds of services? I see Table 2, for instance, has park repairs and enhancements, and it's got some money identified here. It also has TPL money identified here, student nutrition, et cetera. Are these new spending over and above what was already budgeted for, or are these the actual spending that was going to take place anyway within these divisions?
It's a mix, primarily new. Toronto Public Library enhancements have happened through the poverty reduction budget over the last few years, so that money has come specifically through that, as has student nutrition.
I just find it strange to see MLS audits identified as a strong neighborhood allocation. Aren't these?
So the request of council was to identify the enhanced funding that had gone to these neighborhoods through different program streams. So that's what the chart is attempting to isolate for in response to that council request. On the PF&R side, it has to, many of the projects are initiated through the Partnership Opportunity Legacy Fund, and there may be existing PF&R capital that gets married up to a POL fund investment, and that's why that number is the most significant.
I understand the POL fund is capital, and I see it's 3.533 in over the 3 years. But these other expenditures, these aren't in addition to the poverty reduction strategy, or they're not in addition to the new apartment bylaw initiative under MLS, or student nutrition here, there's an additional $911,698,000 or $598,000. Are these part of the poverty reduction strategy too? These, or are they attributed to strong neighborhoods?
Well, so, Councillor, in terms of MLS, you're correct. I think that's base allocation. In terms of TPL, or sorry, Toronto Public Libraries and Toronto Public Health, that is by and large new funding that is both poverty reduction expenditure in neighborhood improvement areas.
So these amounts are just the amount, for instance, of student nutrition, 900 in, well, let me look at the totals even. So the 1.9 million, is that specifically for the amount of money spent in these priority neighborhoods? Or is it the total new amount for student nutrition in this 3-year period?
We'll confirm the divide on the number. It would be a mix of both.
Okay, it may be completely overstating what's getting spent without, or duplicating what's being reported elsewhere. It's hard to understand this.
That's your last question?
It's not mutually exclusive from the poverty reduction spend. That's correct.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move a motion to extend our meeting time to conclude this item. Can you do that?
That's very nice. I had spoken to all of you earlier that I would be leaving at lunchtime to speak at an event. Councillor Fletcher, if she's willing to take the chair during the lunch hour and you want to work through to complete the agenda, it's fine with me, but they want to extend. Okay, so it's the will of the committee to extend. All those in favor? And that is carried.
Everybody gets 15 minutes.
Oh,
We're just extending to complete this item.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I want to thank staff for the report. I want to also just be really clear that my line of questioning was not necessarily to take any positive attributes that are coming out of this report. I think it's very important that we provide service to the communities of need, and clearly there was a methodology that was in place. At the early beginnings of 2012, 2013. I also am very encouraged to know that there's going to be a review of those neighborhoods. I want to just literally put on the table, and I think it's important, is that in particular in the downtown east and around the Moss Park area, I've now had a chance to, represent my communities there for 7 years, and what I've learned is that, and oftentimes the one-size-fit-all evaluation model for the city does not work for us in the area. The polarization between those who have and those who have not are too great. And yet at the same time, when we use sort of the methodology to sort of evaluate whether or not the downtown is doing well, I think it could probably at quick glance say, yeah, we're not doing poorly. However, when we go deeper and take another look, what we are seeing is that people are indeed requiring an additional level of service. And that means that we have to coordinate the agencies that are there, and those agencies are stretched rather thin as far as I can tell. They're being pulled into neighborhoods like Regent Park because there is an identified need there and they have a designation as a neighborhood improvement area. But it also means that those agencies are probably not taking good care of other pockets that are within a larger catchment area that don't have that subcategorization of ID. And that includes those who are in the downtown east. And if I break that down a little bit further, that would include those in the Church and Wellesley corridor. That includes those who are living now along the Yonge corridor, those around the Yonge Dundas Square area, which is actually a neighborhood, which people don't think it is a neighborhood, but we do have residents who live there. And of course, the Moss Park community, if I break it up into 3 pieces for you, you'll recognize that a portion of it sits in Ward 28, a portion of it sits in Ward 27, and then there's another component that sits around the Church and Dundas area, which oftentimes gets left behind. So although I want to commend staff and our partners at the United Way for doing such a good job at helping the city globally, I just want to put on the table that it's really important that we don't cannibalize services in the neighborhood because they're just not designated. And that's one of the real life outcomes and effect that we're experiencing in the downtown east. So therefore, the parks in the downtown, and including the downtown east, are filled with people who've got no place to go because there's not enough day programming when the shelters are asking them to leave so they can clean the facility. We have incredible wait lists, and people have they've just bothered to not come up and show up anymore because they can't get their kids into programs. And we also have BIAs the business improvement area that is now stepping up to supplement some of our lack of programming. So they provide programming in the parks so that people who have no place to go will have a place to go in the parks. They are providing additional services to supplement city work that should be carried out by the Toronto Public Service. And I'll give you an example. The Downtown Young BIA has a budget of $2 million. It's one of the largest, most innovative BIAs in the country. $600,000 is going to taking care of public space, removing graffiti, adding program in the park around community safety, healthy neighborhood resiliency build-up. That is not sustainable. And so, although on one hand we're seeing some investments and new investments going into other neighborhoods not in those areas, we're now actually shifting and downloading services onto unexpected, quite honestly, partners. And I know that the same thing has happened in St. Lawrence Market. The same thing has happened to a lesser degree in the financial district. The same thing has happened in the Church and Wellesley area. And I think we need to sort of get together and work together collaboratively to sort of be honest about what we need and how we're going to get there. Thank you.
Yes, I do have a motion, and I'm sorry, I'll ditto, actually, frankly, what my colleague here is saying. And this is actually not a little motion. I think it's a little bit of a bigger motion. That's why I put number 2 beside it, to request a report on the budget to the Budget Committee on the resources necessary to undertake this work in 2018. We are a booming city. We absolutely are a booming city. We have growth challenges. We have population shift challenges. And to focus only on some communities where there is the greatest need is not enough. It is not enough. And I think we need to say it, especially in a city that prides itself. When people say, I come to Toronto, oh, I love your neighborhoods. Well, you know what, if we want to preserve those neighborhoods, if we want to grow those neighborhoods, then we have to catch the nuances, and that's really what this is about. And I could tell you the stories in my ward where there are development pressures and there are opportunities, and I can't just say to staff when, staff are figuring out their budgets, oh, I want a child care center here, or I want a Filipino center, a senior center here. It has to be done on the basis of good planning. And the core to good planning is it has to be in one of, where is it? It has to be in one of these documents. If it's not in one of these documents, staff say it's not in the plan, away you go, you're bumped below the list, period, it's over. So I think, knowing, having social demographers review, frankly, all the neighborhoods. There's some that are going to be stable. In fact, most of my ward is going to be stable. Don't mess with anything. Leave it alone. There might be some pockets here and there. There's some pockets downtown. There's some pockets here. We want to catch that. We want to document that so that if money does become available through Section 37 or provincial or federal programs that come down the line, that we have a strategy and we have a method of addressing it. So that's what this might be. I don't know if it's a major piece of work. It's certainly not a minor piece of work, maybe a modest piece of work. Maybe it can be done somewhat with internal resources, but if it can't be, then I'd certainly like to know, and I think council would like to know how much it's going to cost, when it can be done, so that in the next term of council, we can actually get on to looking at other areas as well. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Chair.
One motion in front of us today. You've all seen it. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much. And the item is amended. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you very much. Moving right along to item, sorry. Oh, I thought we extended to finish managing refugee. Oh, we're coming back at 1:30. Coming back at 1:30 or 20 to 2? What would you like to do? Councillor Ford? 1:30 okay with you? All right, 1:30. Thanks, everybody.